Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Hang Up. I'm Matt Dillahunty. You're watching me on the line here on YouTube, unless you're not, unless somehow or another there's a clip that got migrated somewhere else, in which case you need to go search for the line on YouTube and like and subscribe and all that kinds of stuff. Because in addition to the program that you're watching right now, the Hang Up here on Wednesday nights, which is a mix of religion, philosophy, and politics, there are a number of other good programs here. I was really looking forward to the show tonight. We didn't get to do one last week, and I miss it. Like, there was really good reasons for not doing it. And we started a little bit late today because of a tech issue, actually probably a couple tech issues, which both of our producers, Jimmy and Arden, knocked out, and here we are live. I can hear everybody and everything. It's all good. Man, there's lots of news that I would love to address, not the least of which is that former president, failed president, Donald Trump has been indicted for a third time, and this one's the doozy that everybody's been waiting on, where he's basically charged with a number of things relating to the January 6th insurrection. And so I'd love to talk about that. He claims he's the victim of Nazi-esque corruption, and that this is, why didn't they bring these charges 2 years ago? You're the fucking former president. It takes a little while. Oh, no, this is election interference. They know that I'm the front runner for 2024. Bullshit. Even Republicans have started to turn against you. And now I think everybody's flailing around. I'd love to talk about that, but there's other things that happen too. For example, in Pittsburgh, the 2018 synagogue gunman who killed 11 Jews while spewing white supremacist beliefs online has been sentenced to death. And we could talk about the death penalty and when and where it may or may not be justified, and nuanced views and positions about that. And we could talk about religious violence and how some people are not only spewing hateful rhetoric that targets Jews because of their heritage and a little bit related to their religion, but there's other things that have gone on too. And tonight's guest is my producer, my partner, and also the host of one of the hosts of the Transatlantic Call-In Show, which airs tomorrow, actually. And she'll have all the details about who's going to be on Transatlantic Call-In Show tomorrow. But recently, I had Dr. Ben on the Hang Up, and Ben is another one of the hosts on Transatlantic Call-In Show. Ben is a friend and has recently become a real life doctor, not just student Dr. Ben. And when I invited Ben on the Hang Up, my goal, there's a number of different things that I'm always trying to do with this show and the other shows. I'm trying to reach out to people who produce good content on smaller channels to give them access to this network, this channel. And we're going to see some of that. I found a gentleman the other day, stumbled across his content, reached out. I like what he's doing. We're going to get him on the show sometime in the near future. I've done what I can to promote smaller channels whenever I could. And I wanted to get Ben on the show specifically not as a trans person. I understand that because he's on Transatlantic Call-In Show, much like Arden and Katy and everybody else, that it can be overwhelming to constantly be the trans representative. You guest on a show and every call becomes about trans rights issues and everything else. And I find that incredibly frustrating for somebody to be to just become one tiny facet of who they are. And so when I had Ben on, I specifically told the call screener, I'd like to avoid trans-related calls. I'd like for Ben to be able to do one show where he's just Ben, where he's just Dr. Ben and not trans Dr. Ben. And it was a little bit of a gift, but it was also because I want people to see that there's more to people than just one label. I'm an atheist. I'm a secular humanist. I'm a free thinker. I'm a skeptic. I'm any number of things. And I'm happy to talk about most or all of those things at different times. And it turns out you guys like Arden almost as much as I do, because when Arden guested on here last, it was one of the most viewed episodes of the show. So a couple of weeks ago, we decided, hey, let's just do another show with me and Arden. It's easy for us to set up and work with here. I love doing it. It puts us on the same schedule, and you guys, we get to promote TACIS and other things, and it's just going to be fun. And I was really hoping that I could get Arden on the show, and it wouldn't be trans activist Arden Hart. It could just be, I don't know, maybe snake raiser Arden Hart, or a reptile hobbyist Arden Hart, or godless heathen Arden Hart. Who knows? But then Richard Dawkins had to go and be awful for the 19 millionth time, and I didn't want to address it. Hammett Mehta from Friendly Atheist had already posted a great article talking about Dawkins having Helen Joyce on his podcast, and how once again he's come out with some transphobic nonsense. And one of the regular viewers of the show reached out to me. He's like, "Are you going to reply?" I'm like, "No, let him kill off his legacy and work to render himself irrelevant in his waning years. I don't need to. I don't need to respond to that every single time. There's a lot more to us, each of us. The other wonderful host and co-host, I see Shannon in the chat. Hi, I got more pictures of you, by the way. Your appeal to Facebook to have Facebook show me more pictures of you, it worked. I saw more of them. But Shannon Q and all the other people who are here on this network, on occasion, you see atheists of color get mildly, unfortunately, tokenized, or you need to be the representative. Come talk to us about, here, come be the atheist, come be the female atheist, come be the black atheist, come be the Hispanic atheist. And we're all guilty of it because we're trying to make sure that the secular community, both in representation on shows like this and at events and just in the general public, look less and less like me, even though it can still include people who look like me. It's not like we're trying to ostracize every cishet white guy. Although that's not the worst plan, it's probably not great. So Dawkins is a little bit confusing to me, because a number of people kept saying, "Oh, no, this is what he's saying. It's about biology and it's about science, and he has some expertise here." But the truth is that there's a distinction between sex in a biological reproductive gamete sense and gender in the social construct, it's like an overlapping. If you drew a Venn diagram of biology, sociology, psychology, you would have a construct that identifies with gender that is broader than most of what we end up talking about. And it's certainly broader than just simple boys have a penis, girls have a vagina, or it's all about XX and XY chromosomes and all this. And so it's like, oh, define a woman. And you get, well, a woman is an adult human female, except that's, and Arden will talk about this more later, that's probably better reworded as an adult female human, so that human becomes the subject. But also you could say that, what is woman? Well, a woman is one of several generalized sociological roles related to primary, secondary, and extended sex characteristics combined with psychological constructs of individual identity. Okay, what did that tell me? That's the key. What did it tell you? Because if you're looking for how do we figure out what box somebody's in, it would be nice if you could define the box. But many of the boxes we used are generalized approximations. There's not a set of characteristics that necessarily applies to everyone who might fit in that box. And so we're talking about things in a general rule. There's not absolutes here. There's not absolutes when you're talking about whether or not sex is binary. It is not absolutely binary. It is normatively binary. It is modally binary. Within a sexually dimorphic species, and that's still a generalization because there are exceptions to these things. The attempt to oversimplify things is incredibly frustrating. Now, Arden was already booked, and we were going to talk about these other things, and then you had Dawkins come in and do his interview with Helen Joyce, and I was going to be done with it. I was not going to bring it up or mention him by name because I don't want this to turn into the let's bash Richard, because it's just too easy. I mean, here you have one of the world's preeminent science communicators, who is doing harm while thinking that he's the good guy. He could be. Let me tell you one other thing that's in the news that if you haven't learned about it yet, you need to go find out what's going on. Because in Antarctica, there's a 6.4 sigma event that has taken place. What that means is, here, we pull up a little graph here. This is a chart showing daily standard deviations for Antarctic sea ice. Now, remember, Antarctica being the southern hemisphere is right in the middle of winter right now, or at the height of winter. And all of those varying blue and gray lines show, they plot Antarctic sea ice, which needs to refreeze in the winter. And while we've had more and more hot summers and everything else, this tracks the deviation from the norm. So 0 is where the norm is for Antarctic sea ice. And you can see there are certain times when it freezes more or less. 2023 is this red line, which is 6.4 standard deviations away from the norm. That's climate change. That is, whether you think that it's caused by humans or not, whatever, this is something that everybody needs to be educated on. This is the type of thing that's going to result in coral reefs dying and a catastrophic impact, if not deadly impact on the planet. We could be looking at the beginning of the end. And so here we have Trump being indicted, a Six Sigma event related to Antarctic sea ice. In the United States, we've lost the Supreme Court to right-wing ideologues. We've lost Roe v. Wade. We have issue after issue. We have people lying online, and yet we are somehow stuck where the only thing that we ever get to talk about is, what is a woman? Because a handful of people have decided that the trans community needs to be their fucking political football. Let's punch them in the face. Let's spike it like it's a touchdown. Let's make things as difficult for them as possible. And so Dawkins, who could, as one of the preeminent science educators in our lifetime, he has access to some of the greatest minds in all of the scientific fields. He could be doing a podcast and educating people on climate change and getting experts on to talk about the Antarctic ice. He could be getting people on to talk politics with regard to Supreme Court issues and other things. I get it. He's not here in the United States, so maybe he's not focused on that. And evidently, nobody in Great Britain has time to be anything but fucking gender critical these days. He could be doing that. He could be interviewing scientists and real experts on real issues. But instead, he's interviewing non-scientists. He's interviewing right-wing propagandists and gender-critical folks on trans issues, while ironically claiming he's on the side of the victims who are being bullied by the trans community, who are, in fact, having their rights taken away and have become this ideological football. These right-wing ideologues, which should just be called wrong-wing ideologues all the time, whenever possible, have really moved into a significant contingent of the online atheist, secular, skeptic community. Not so much the humanist community, because generally speaking, the people who identify with humanist values, and Dawkins had his American Humanist Award rescinded because of his transphobic views, generally humanists get it. But I just saw a couple hours ago, which sealed the deal that this is what we're going to be talking about. I just saw that Richard is saying Jordan Peterson has asked him whether or not woke is a religion. Hours ago, Dawkins has agreed to answer Jordan Peterson's question, either on a podcast or in some blog post or something else. Now, Jordan Peterson, for those who don't know, is like the king of the incels and Lord High anti-trans buffoon who I've sat on stage with and exposed his buffoonery, both on religion and on other issues as well, to the point where he won't sit down and have a conversation with me again. That's fine. I'm really not that interested. I did what I needed to do, and now I've moved on. And by the way, in September, I'll be demolishing Daniel Hakikachu, the terrible Muslim apologist advocating for child rape, amongst other things. That'll be a nice, easy 3 hours and some change. But Richard Dawkins has agreed to answer Jordan Peterson's question about whether or not woke is a religion. Oh, wait, woke and religion, two subjects that Dawkins is also not an expert on. I don't know why. There's this penchant between supposed intellectuals that they're going to not talk to actual experts, but talk to each other because they think they're smarter. I've done what I can to get experts on here. When we have legal issues, I get lawyers on here. When we get health issues, I get doctors on here. When we get trans issues, I get trans folks and trans activists on here. I will also talk about things that I have some understanding of, despite not necessarily having any expertise. I remember sitting on stage with Richard one night during the Q&A portion after a talk, and people were asking him questions that frustrated him. Now, to be fair, other people can tell you this. One of my jobs when I was basically facilitating conversations with Dawkins, I did events with Sam Harris and Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins, and then I also did events with other smaller creators. But when I sat down with Richard, my job was to shepherd the evening. And that requires two things. One is to do an introduction, kind of run interference, direct questions, but also, and this is not me, I've said this many times before, I genuinely liked doing this, and I genuinely liked Richard and his personality for this, but he's not the most personable chap on the planet. It takes a little effort to kind of get him started. And the easiest way to get him started is to ask him questions about biology. The thing that he's so keen on, that gets him in the mood to want to talk and to teach, which he's been exceptional at. And so that was my job. I'm going to make sure that he gets biology questions. Well, one night he expressed his concern or confusion. Why are these people asking me questions about these subjects that I have no expertise in? And I explained, well, you're a public intellectual that they came to see. They want to see what you have to think about the issue that they care about, and just, answer them. And you can always just say, that's not really my field. I don't have thoughts on that and everything else. I wish I'd given him some slightly different advice, because he's now being quoted by gender critical folks, right-wing propagandists. So even if he was just kind of confusingly making an unwise, pedantic point about biological sex from the standpoint of a biologist, he's done it in a particularly stupid way that results in him doing harm to the trans community and then whining about how the trans community is bullying him. Of all the things this incredible science communicator could do, of all of the scientists and experts that he could be putting people in touch with on all of the issues that are important to the survival of humankind, he's decided to pick up propagandists and naysayers, wrong-wing thinkers, and prop them up on his podcast, on his blogs, in order to do harm to the trans community under the guise of presenting science. He should know better, both strategically and scientifically. And so, while I wanted to just have a fun night where Arden and I came on and talked about Trump getting indicted and everything else, instead, here's how tonight's going to go. First of all, everybody welcome my lovely, talented producer and partner, Arden Hart.
Hello, hello, hello. Hopefully the audio stuff is all working.
I hear you just fine. I'm hoping they all hear you just fine as well.
Good.
We have calls on the line. I figure you and I will talk about this briefly. And there are actually, there's already calls. We can start on calls the second you want to.
Sure.
Because there's some addressing this issue. But we've had a wild week. We got some new eggs from one of our snakes late last night, 7 eggs from a pewter pied that had been bred to a banana het dreamsicle, for the people who are keeping track. And so we're excited about that. We're going to a reptile convention this weekend. We're getting work done. We're going to take some time and go visit family and stuff like that. How excited were you to have all of our plans undone by Dawkins deciding that he really needs to engage on what a woman is, whether or not woke's a religion?
I
Welcome,
mean,
honey.
this is par for the course, really, with politics in the last 5 years or so. I think most voting people care about the economy and the direction of like the health of our planet in the future, and like affordable healthcare and housing and workers' rights. We have this huge strike going on in Hollywood, the SAG-AFTRA writer strike going on. Like, these are the issues that actually affect most Americans. And if Richard Dawkins had just said, I don't personally get the whole trans thing, it's a little confusing to me, it makes me uncomfortable, we would not be sitting here having a conversation with it, because you are entitled to not understand things, to be confused about things. You're entitled to have personal prejudice about things. But the problem with Dawkins is that he is using his platform as a science educator to be very publicly, very factually wrong about the matter of trans rights. He's using, surprisingly, despite being a biologist, some of the worst biological arguments to defend his position that there is. Like, Katy and I joke all the time about how there's 3 levels to the biological sex argument, and level 1 is when you talk about chromosomes. And that's what he's been doing lately. Even the non-biologists who have been having the trans conversations a lot will tell you their definition of sex is the capacity to produce large immobile gametes or small mobile gametes. That's like the level 3 definition that protects you against some of the pushback you might hear from certain arguments in favor of trans rights. Not all of them, though, by far. But it's sad to see someone who had such a prolific career, who really helped so many people, rather than talk to, as you pointed out, he probably could make contact with some of the people who are really at the forefront of producing research on this topic. He's promoting the book by what's her name, the crazy lady who went on Joe Rogan, the picture of the hole in the girl. I'm blanking on the book. He promoted her book, which cited a study that was repealed by the publication, and they publicly denounced it. He is citing Helen Joyce, who's publicly said it's an imperative to reduce the number of trans people. Like, he's clearly not actually seeking the truth on this matter, but I think, personally, this is the first time that he has gotten a lot of mainstream attention in a while, and it's feeling pretty good to him. I don't know if he's aware of the fact that the only people who are giving him mainstream attention are the far right, but that's the situation he's in, and we've seen this happen a lot to otherwise intellectual people. I think one of the most famous examples is like the Weinstein brothers, and they're who's kind of started the whole intellectual dark web thing, right? Like, I believe one of those guys was a evolutionary biologist as well, and went on a whole like race realism thing and anti-COVID vaccine sort of conspiracies. So it's just sad that somebody who I think so many people in the atheist community looked up to has gotten swept up in propaganda, and now the rest of us who represent, atheists on the ground, so to speak, are spending our time talking about this rather than, as you pointed out, our planet is dying. We could be talking about so many things that matter, and instead, we're again defending misinformation against trans people because trans people are being attacked actively, and it's egregious what's happening to us, and it's a complete derailment from reality to have this conversation. And I see a few people in the chat who are throwing a hissy fit saying that he's defending science and why do we disagree with his definition of a woman? You don't know what we think about our definition of a woman. And I see there's a caller in the queue who's got a similar topic, who says, why is the definition for adult human woman, it's adult human female, by the way, you got it wrong. You don't know that we think that. It's very frustrating. because none of these people have actually been in this argument. They're just hearing what Dawkins says, and because they admire him as an intellectual, they're taking his word as gospel and going and spewing it forth upon the rest of the world.
I will say in chat, I think it was IT217 who mentioned the name that you were looking for was Abigail Schreier.
Yes, Abigail Schreier. Thank you, chatter. Yes, the transgender craze seducing our daughters or something along those lines.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and start with that call?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk to that caller. I think that would be a good one.
I'm gonna mute you for just a second, caller. Before we do this, here's the thing. I want to be clear. Welcome to the Hang Up. It's my show, but I'm not trans. Now, Arden is going to deal with all of this stuff again tomorrow, and then we're going to have a Go Pleasant weekend. Go have a pleasant weekend? Yes, that Go Pleasant, have a weekend. A weekend pleasant, go have with me to that place.
Yes.
So here's the thing. I'm going to I have no idea how much I'm just going to let or make Arden answer these questions and how much I'm going to jump in. We tend to work together very well across the board on everything. But because I know she's got to do this again tomorrow, there's a good chance that I'm going to jump in. Nobody needs to think that I'm sitting here, cis knighting, which I just made up and sounds awesome. When Arden can absolutely say whatever the hell she wants on here and everywhere else, whenever she wants. Tomorrow on the Transatlantic Call-In Show, you're going to have not only Arden, and this is going to be, is it 2 o'clock tomorrow like normal?
Yep, normal time.
2 p.m. Central. So 4 hours earlier than you tuned in for this, tune back in here on the line, and you'll have Arden and Nominal Naomi, a wonderful trans woman guest who's been on the show before and who pissed off a lot of gender critical people by breastfeeding her baby. So hooray. Then on the Sunday show, Jimmy will be joining me, and I'm guessing producing, because that's the way it always goes. We have a lot of fun on the Sunday show where we talk more about religion. Tomorrow will be more about trans issues. On Monday, Skeptalk will be hosted by Forrest Valkai. Tuesday, you've got Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock. And for those who aren't familiar, I don't know how you're not familiar with Dave. Dave is dying from ALS and has been doing it out loud and talking about all of the things related to death and dying and illness like that. Everything from death with dignity to living, truly living, not just surviving as you're dealing with things like this. Dave, I love to pieces, and so please make sure you get a chance to tune in. We'll be back here again next Wednesday for the Hang Up. And I also want to thank the Apostate Paul for screening tonight. We've got that. Now, thanks for hanging on. I'm going to try to make good use of the mute button. There is a delay, and it has caused a massive amount of frustration on some calls. Because these are trans issues, things could get heated or frustrated. I'm going to ask everybody, please just exercise some patience. Try not to ask 3 questions at once. Just like get a question, get an answer, define some terms, hash it out, ask if that makes sense, and move on like that. It should be fairly easy, I hope. So Matt in New York, pronouns are he, him, wants to talk about the definition of woman. So welcome to the show, Matt. You're on with Arden and Matt.
Hi.
Hi.
So yeah, I just want to ask, well, I kind of have 2 questions, and the first one is a 2-parter. So I just want to ask, do you guys find anything wrong with the definition adult human female for woman? And if you do, then why?
Yeah. So
cool.
I think the words used to describe women themselves are not as problematic. The order is slightly problematic. Adult human female seems to suggest that female is the subject rather than a modifier to human, which is how I think a more appropriate arrangement of that definition would be an adult female human. That being said, I think it's really important to, when this definition is thrown out there, adult human female, people often will kind of dust off their shoulders and think, ha, job well done. That excludes trans women. We're good here. Except for you actually have to break down each of those individual words and find out what they mean. The line for adult in biological terms is not super clear. Lines between species are notoriously unclear, and what makes a female, you can make arguments for how to define female from a population level observation. But when we're talking about individuals, those definitions, as they do for every definition, often fail, which is why definitions are descriptive of how words are used, not prescriptive of some like ontological truth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that, you know, the species are related. You know, you can't exactly pinpoint like when someone, you know, turns from child to adult. Species are related, and, you know, sex is, some people are intersex, so, you know, but I still think like, even though, okay, but we know who is objectively a child, we know who's objectively an adult, we know all three of us are humans.
Do we know that?
And I mean,
where?
Yeah.
At what? Okay. At what point does someone stop being a child and become an
I
adult
don't think
in
you're an
biological
android.
terms?
Well, I just said that you can't exactly pinpoint it, but
Right. But then you said we can objectively determine what's a child. Like, it's sure, I would agree with you.
Yeah,
if you're pointing to a 2-year-old, I would agree with you that's a child. But the point is, people like to think that that definition is clear cut and easy, job well done. And it's not that simple, is all I'm saying.
Okay. Well, I have another question.
Okay, go for it.
So I have been, you know, accused of being transphobic or misgendering people for stating their sex, and as far as I'm aware, the definition of trans is somebody whose gender does not match their sex. So how is it misgendering to just state someone's sex? Like, if I say a trans woman is a man, why is that like wrong?
Because you're not stating their
like,
sex.
Not morally.
Well, for one, you're not stating their sex, and two, I don't know how much you know about an individual's biology to be able to make that determination. I mean, most of what transition does to a body is essentially changing your sex characteristics. And while you can't change your chromosomes, that's pretty much the only thing you can't change. And we pretty rarely define sex exclusively by chromosomes. So I don't really see how saying a trans woman is a man is calling them by their sex. That sounds like you're trying to assert that trans women are men to me.
I am.
Okay. How did you determine? So you seem to be not making a distinction. Some people make a distinction between man and woman being the terms for gender and male and female being the terms for sex. But you're not doing that because you asked about a definition of woman, which you have adult female human. When you say, for example, if you run across someone who's a woman and you happen to know they're trans, when you just say they're a man, you're basically denying everything about gender as they identify it, and just asserting that because of the of what they were assigned at birth and what your narrow definition is, that you're going to ignore the realities of the social construct, of the psychology, of all of these things, and just pretend that you know what somebody's, for example, I'm going to guess you think it's all about gametes. Like, what are my chromosomes and how do you know?
I don't know your chromosomes, but you identify as a cis person.
I
As far
actually,
as you know.
I identify as a man, and I will tell you that I'm cis. But how do you know I'm cis?
You said it earlier.
How do I know? How do you know? How do I know if you're cis?
You don't have to. I know I am.
Okay.
That wasn't the question.
So that wasn't the question at all. This was.
It's not a.
So it seems that you want to know what category other people should be put in, but you don't want anybody to know what category you should be put in. So it seems like you understand that it's none of your fucking business until you want to make somebody else's business your business. My thing is, how do you know if somebody's gay?
You can't objectively prove that.
If somebody doesn't tell you, how do you know whether they're cis or trans?
Well, I've seen but I wouldn't magically know. I can't see what people have.
So the
it can be proven.
No. The answer is you don't.
Well, actually, I can.
How?
Naked.
So you're telling me that if you see somebody naked, you can tell whether they're cis or trans?
Tons of trans women have vaginas.
You want to bet thousands of dollars on that?
Indistinguishable. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I will show you. I will bet you $10,000, and I will show you 10 pictures of naked people. And if you can get more than 50% of them right as to whether they're cis or trans, you can win the $10,000, or you'll have to pay me $10,000. You sure you want to take that bet?
Well, unfortunately, I've seen Arden's penis, so I know he's a man.
Oh, so you're on my OnlyFans. That's cute. So you
so
jerk off to my
up.
porn. You jerk off to my porn, and you run away like a scared little bitch. You jerk off to my porn, but you want to call me a man? So it sounds like what's happening is that you're gay, and you are really scared of your attraction to men, and you think I'm a man. That's got to be really confusing for you, living in a world so detached from reality. I'm really sorry. Yeah. And thank you for your $750. I appreciate it. It'll go towards my rent.
Yeah, here's the wonderful thing. We do, well, not we, the Line Network, Arden does a weekly show, Transatlantic Call-In Show. You can watch it tomorrow. And if you're someone who is actually proud of being transphobic, you can call in then and talk and get their views on stuff. And if you're someone who's been accused of being transphobic, but you don't think you are, you'd just like some more information, it's a great opportunity to call in and get that information. We're kind of doing a miniature version of it here. And I love the fact that as far as I can tell, you gendered Arden correctly until we backed you into an intellectual corner to show how absolutely uninformed you were about this. And then you wanted to talk about how you've seen her penis, and then you want to misgender her. So it's cool. I love the fact that this is what you've decided to obsess on. That
it's also
you're demonstrably wrong, and acknowledge that it's none of your business. But damn, you sure are keen to check it all out and then be an asshole. And by the way, hang up instantly because we're going to call you out for being transphobic.
It's also, somebody in this chat was like, oh, what a douche. Sorry, Arden. You shouldn't be sorry. I am not ashamed of my body at all, quite frankly. If I was ashamed of my body, I wouldn't be able to do the line of work that I do because I put myself in the shoes to be consumed by the eyes of men all day, every fucking day. I'm not ashamed of my body even slightly. I'm hot as fuck. So if this dude thinks he got me, I've seen your penis on your pornos, thanks. I don't know if you thought that was going to make me feel bad, you're so fucking confused.
It's funny. I have a number of questions that I put together, and I prepared, for this. I've been preparing for this off and on. See, for more than 10 years, if you went back in history to watch episodes of other shows that I've been involved with, I've talked about trans issues, and I had a number of really wonderful trans rights activists that I counted amongst my friends, or at least friendly acquaintances, that I would go to with questions. Probably the first one that I went to frequently was Zinnia Jones. And hi, Zinnia, if you see this, thank you so much for your help over the years. And then Dory Mooneyham, who was a friend of Beth's, who gave a number of talk at secular events. And this was still back when we used to describe things in terms of gender identity, gender expression, doing all of these things. You have to remember, when you hear the Matt Walshes in the world saying, what makes a woman? What they're doing is taking the easy, lazy way out because they want you to provide a definition. But you should ask them because, we have asked them. And they'll say, it's an adult human female, which Arden's already addressed why those words probably need to be inverted to adult female human. So the human is the subject. That's correct. Yeah, I appreciate that in chat where you said Arden is hot, but would you have this general rule that you're not supposed to comment on host looks? So just avoid it. But thanks.
I did it
and
first,
you're right.
so I understand. But thank you.
It's fair, and you're all right. But when you push it back on them and you get them to try to define those terms, the thing that we have to recognize is that we're always trying to generalize and approximate. There isn't a definition of woman that includes every cis woman and excludes every trans woman, unless your definition of woman is cis woman, in which case you're still going to wind up with some problems. But I had very specific questions, and I've written some of them down. Some of them I've known for ages. One is for everybody who's like, we need to identify trans women. Okay, cool. How do you tell if somebody's cis or trans? Oh,
well,
you know what?
can.
You ask them.
Yeah.
Oh, I can tell. I could tell if you showed me naked pictures. Well, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pay the $750 for some of those, or whatever it is. But also recognizing that here's a question. If you're out there right now, this is a genuine question. I'm not saying that that an example doesn't exist. What I'm saying is I've spent a great deal of time trying to come up with an example. And if you have the example, call in and tell us. Give me a situation where whether or not someone qualifies as a woman, cis or trans, is relevant. It's not relevant when you're hiring anybody. It's not relevant when you're getting ready to have sex with somebody. It's not relevant with regard to whatever categories of sports you've got. For example, my take on sports is that by and large, sports should be non-binary, that anyone and everyone can participate, perhaps in different leagues, depending on their physical characteristics and abilities, which may or may not break down along whether you went through a stereotypical male or female puberty, but it doesn't necessarily need to go there. What category is there where is someone a woman important? Because that's what they're asking. They're asking, how do I tell if you're a real woman? And they have the no true Scotsman fallacy where everybody has their different definitions of real woman. But I want to know, and there may be some, and once we find them, the categories where whether or not you're a woman is relevant, when you find that category, I want to then be able to take a look at it and see how we can address that. But I don't know what the categories are. It's none of your business. If you're hiring, if you're firing, if you're sleeping with someone, you don't run any sports stuff. The sports organization can do that. And whether or not you're a woman isn't really relevant to most of those things. It's other factors that they're using as criteria, like testosterone and things like that. So in which situation is it relevant? And then how do you tell if this is why I asked the question, how do you tell if somebody's gay? You get stumped by these really easy questions. It's because you, caller, haven't thought about it beyond the he, I saw a penis. Ha, 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 somebody's got some science about chromosomes. Oh, let me own the libs. That's the extent of the depth that you've put into these conversations. You ready for some more?
Yeah, hit us with whichever. All of these sound good. I think number 15-6 and
yep, we'll go there.
Okay.
So Chris, an atheist who doesn't seem to want to give us pronouns, just wants to say man.
Just man.
Just man. Welcome, Chris. You're on the hang up. Welcome, man.
Yes, sir.
What's your question?
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I was just
I
was wondering if you think, am I talking too loud? I'm sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
No.
You're actually a little quiet,
think,
but that might be my fault. So let me tweak that, and you can just go on with your question.
Do you think kids can have the mental capacity? And I'm sorry, I'm just a little nervous.
You're fine.
And can consent to puberty blockers?
So kids don't consent to any medical treatment. Their parents or guardians do on their behalf, or in the case where they don't have a legal guardian, I think there are some special exceptions where doctors can make that decision, but there are criteria for that. So
you think someone could, because I just want to get this straight. Do you know what they give when they give puberty blockers, correct? Do you know the drug that they're given?
Do you know the entire?
It's called Lupron.
I'm familiar. I was on Lupron.
Okay, do you know what Lupron is historically used for?
Yes, Lupron is used for precocious puberty historically.
And medically castrating sex offenders.
Sure. It can be used for that. However,
okay, I have one other question.
Wait, hold on.
Hang on.
Okay,
yeah, you don't just get to barrel through with all your propaganda points.
Please, Chris. Please, Chris, don't make me mute you. We're answering your questions. We're trying to be here, but I know that you said you were nervous. But it's like
I am.
It's like you're so desperate to get to a point and use your buzzwords about chemical castration, which doesn't apply.
It's not buzzwords.
It is a fucking buzzword. Now I'm going to mute you, and you're going to sit there quietly while Arden explains why it's a buzzword and everything else, because you can't shut up when somebody's answering the question you ask. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so when Lupron is used for a period of longer than 2 years, there after that point, be a statistically significant risk of infertility. However, when used within the typical treatment parameters for transition care, it's within 2 years. All of those risks, all of the risks that exist, like for any medicine, can apply before the guidelines, because humans have very diverse biology, and sometimes they can deviate from the population expectation. But generally speaking, within 2 years of use, if you either go off of Lupron and then resume your natal endogenous puberty or hormones, most of the time, there is no long-term risk to fertility. And if it's going longer than that, that's because they're intentionally using it to try to affect someone's sexual desires. But that's not what's happening when kids are being treated for puberty blockers. They are specifically being used within a certain guideline frame to get them to a point where they can either decide to stop or move on to cross-sex hormones, at which point all those risks are mediated.
Okay, I got you. Do you know the most famous case of puberty blockers, Jazz? You know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I know Jazz Jennings.
Okay, so Jazz Jennings, her doctor was Marcy Bowers. Marcy Bowers has been on record when she said every single patient that she has seen, she's the biggest leading gender affirming doctor, surgeon, whatever. And every single patient that she's treated, I have it. I'm going to put it in the video clip down below so anybody can click on it.
Yeah, Chris, I sounds like you're citing the interview specifically that she did with Matt Walsh.
No, but listen.
No, wait. No, you listen. No, you listen. Chris, no, you listen.
No,
Am I wrong?
You don't want me to finish.
Am I wrong? Did you cite the interview specifically from Matt Walsh's movie?
I muted you for just a second, Chris, because sometimes we're going to ask questions for. Sometimes we're going to ask questions for clarification. Talk over me one more fucking time, you coward. Sometimes we're going to interrupt for clarification. Shut your pie hole. Sometimes we're going to interrupt for clarification because you are desperate to say something. Either you're going to have a conversation here with Arden or we're going to have a conversation without you. Which one would you like it to fucking be?
It's not from the clip from Matt Walsh.
Okay, cool. So that's surprising to me because I know she does appear. Well, I'm fairly certain that's the documentary that she appears in where she says that specifically. That may be what Marcy Bowers has said out loud, but I've read the data and that is not what's indicated in any of the data. It definitely is not all patients 100% of the time. The data specifically seem to indicate the data specifically seem to indicate that if the use of Lupron is ceased within 2 years and they either go on to cross-sex hormones or resume endogenous puberty, that there is no long-term risk to fertility.
That's you know you just made that up. That's complete. That's garbage. You know that.
Wow.
Okay, you're gone.
Marcy Bowers
because I'm not going to be accused of lying.
Wow. So, Chris, you're muted, and you're going to stay muted. I might leave you muted for the rest of the show. You can go out and do some research. So one of the things is we've had actual doctors on the show, and all of the actual medical experts advocating for puberty blockers and for transition treatment have a different view than you. If your response is to just accuse Arden of making something up, I'm going to unmute you now and I'm going to ask you to either apologize and retract it, or prove.
I was going to make a point. I wanted to explain where I got that from, because our friend of the show, Dr. Ben, who's been to medical school, gave me access to the system that doctors use to give treatment to children. That's where I got that information from. So you can take your lying and shove it up your ass, Chris. What do you got other than words that a person said? I don't see you coming here with academic papers or anything like that.
I'll send the video and here you go.
Oh, I don't give a fuck about your video. Bring me evidence, papers. I don't care what some random.
For everybody to see it.
Chris, you can try and send whatever you want, but the first thing you're going to do. The first thing you're going to do is either apologize and retract your accusation that she was lying, or provide evidence that she was lying, or I'm going to ban you from the show. Which one is it?
Lying for what? What did I lie about?
No, you accused me of lying.
You accused Arden of lying. So either you're going to apologize and retract that accusation.
Lie about what? What did I say? What did I say? What did I accuse her of lying?
Here, let me mute you again, you idiot. You accused Arden of lying, and you are now going to apologize and retract it, or you are going to provide evidence that she is lying, or you're going to be banned from the show. Which one would you prefer?
Lying about what? I don't remember what I said she was lying about.
You
said I made that up.
Of lying, you fucking piece of shit.
About what?
Rewind.
Dude, be clear. You're
Goodbye.
Mr.
You little
reasoning.
bitch. You are now banned. No, sir. You can't even fucking understand. We didn't say you lied. We're saying you accused Arden of lying. Why the fuck can you not understand a simple sentence? And we're supposed to take your word on. Wow, you just talked through the whole time.
Yeah,
you're on
no,
mute.
get rid of this guy. I have things to say.
Chris, can you hear me,
sir? Yeah, I can hear you.
Did you accuse Arden of lying?
If I did, I don't remember what I accused her of lying of, because I don't fucking remember. What did I accuse her of?
How did you? Wait, Chris, shut up. How on earth can you have just said?
Answer the fucking question.
How on earth? I muted you on my end, bitch, so nobody can fucking hear you.
That's right.
How the fuck can you say you just made that up, and then when we explain, you say you don't remember? You don't remember what you said less than 2 minutes ago?
Say you lied about. What did I say you lied about?
I said what the guidelines for Lupron indicate for fertility in trans children, and you said you just made that up.
It was used for medically castrate sex offenders historically.
You're so fucking stupid.
Chris,
goodbye. Can we?
Yeah, you are dropped. You are dropped. You ignorant propagandist, single-minded, dog with a bone piece of shit.
It's really
Arden came at you with the actual data, and you accused her of making it up, and then you came with Lupron is used for chemical castration. Yes, in adults.
Right.
But it's a puberty blocker in children. And as long as it's stopped, the long-term effects are minimal, negligible, or non-existent. That's what the data actually show.
Also, I haven't done any research on the treatments. Like, okay, so people, this is, I think, probably where the confusion is. If Lupron is used in one way to, as he put it, I mean, chemically castrated is clearly a politically loaded word, intentionally so. For sex offenders, right? That is a treatment, that is an application of the medicine. It's not the medicine itself that chemically castrates someone. I don't know what the treatment application of Lupron for sex offenders is. It's almost certainly going to be different from children, where the intention is to be on it for a small window of time wherein none of those effects seem to be statistically significant. That's what the data indicate, and that is why there's no doctor worth their salt who's going to put a child on puberty blockers for longer than 2 years, because we know that past 2 years, there are statistically significant side effects to being on Lupron, like bone density and fertility. I think there's something about brain development in there as well. But the guidelines are very clear. When you are using this within this time frame, and then you resume endogenous puberty or cross-sex hormones afterwards, it mitigates all of those risks. So my assumption, uneducated assumption, on why that might be the case for sex offenders would be that because they use it well past what is indicated for children. and probably for good reason. But I don't actually know if that's even true, because Chris just bold-faced accused me of lying based on nothing at all. So I don't know if anything Chris says is trustworthy. I like to try to assume that my conversationalist is honest to a certain degree, but clearly not always the case. Yes, they also use Lupron in cancer treatment sometimes.
Yeah. I also found a study at clinicaltrials.gov on Lupron for sex offender therapy, where 5 white male pedophiles, median age of 50, had been administered basically Lupron by depot injection, 7 milligrams initially, then 22.5 milligrams every 3 months for 12 months, followed by saline placebos, and they monitored the effects of it. And it doesn't talk about necessarily true chemical castration, but at baselines and on placebo, subjects were consistently deceptive regarding increased pedophilic urges and masturbatory frequency, as noted by polygraphs. And the interest preference as measures is essential for monitoring efficacy of treatment in pedophilia. Our study supports the supposition that modification of pedophilic behavior is possible. And so even in this study, it doesn't necessarily result in chemical castration. And when you add in what's already known about how this is used to stop precocious puberty and other things, and then people go on to have normal lives, you are suggesting, you remind me of the people who looked at ivermectin as a horse dewormer and suggested that it would be absurd to use it for other things. Now, it was absurd to use it as a treatment for COVID, but ivermectin has plenty of uses. We use it in our reptile business. It is great for killing off mites, both as a topical solution and in an injected form. It is lazy thinking to take one aspect of a drug and try to use that to suggest that that's what we're doing. It reminds me of the fact that Viagra and other drugs that result in erections for some individuals with some conditions, that isn't what that drug was initially for. It's just what they made the most money of it from. And you could do that with a number of drugs where you can say, oh, you're taking this, well, that's for that. Well, meanwhile, Chris, you're not a doctor, you're not an expert. If you were, we'd have known, because you couldn't have said the ridiculous things you said. But the medical experts disagree with you, and they don't refer to it as, this is the drug that chemically castrate people with, and I'm so nervous to talk about. You're nervous because you're ignorant.
Full of shit. Yeah.
And you could have changed that, because Arden came with actual information, which you dismissed. But also, you can tune in to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. You can go back and watch old episodes where they deal with this very thing, and where Dr. Ben has been on there to talk about this stuff. And not just that, you can go read what every major medical organization dealing with the treatment protocols for trans kids have said about this drug and the other aspects of treatment. You are the one who is in conflict with science, and that's why you're nervous.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to put out there, is that who do we trust here, Brian or every major medical organization within the United States? Furthermore, I think there is some evidence that suggests cross-sex hormones do affect fertility. However, I'm working on a research document to have up and available to viewers and hosts of the show and all of that stuff. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but last week's TACIS, I had to look up, while that may be true that it affects fertility once you get to the cross-sex hormone part, overwhelmingly, the vast majority of patients seeking gender-affirming care, like hormones, get offered the option to store sperm or eggs before they begin that treatment. The vast majority. So even if fertility is affected, that means nothing to their capacity to have a child down the road. Also, if your options are have a child and be miserable and depressed my whole life, or not have a child and not want to kill myself, I think most people, including myself, would have picked... Look, when I chose to go on cross-sex hormone as a fucking teenager, I knew that I was risking my fertility long-term. And I decided I want to be a mom one day. Really bad. I can't wait to have kids eventually. It's no time soon. But eventually I would like to have kids. But I was happy to accept that I was never going to have my own biological children, because I would have rather gotten the treatment that I needed to live a happy life than to be able to bust a nut in someone 10 years down the road and then live a life that's even more difficult than the one I already live. So it is risk I was happy to take.
We got a bunch of callers. There's tons of calls on today. Some are related to this, some are related to other topics, but and we're going to do everything we can to get to all of you. Here's the thing. I want to go back to the beginning of that call and remind people. Chris called in to say, do you think kids can consent to puberty blockers? And when Arden pointed out, that's not how this works, that it isn't just kids saying, yes, I want puberty blockers, and that this is all done under the guidance of medical experts and medical ethicists, and that this fear-mongering that you're getting from the propaganda mills supported by jackasses like Richard Dawkins are giving you information that is misleading you to where you don't understand the issue. And so that's why you see a mindset that says, do you think kids can consent to this? And when Arden says that's not what happens, you go, well, they're giving them this medication that castrates people. No.
Right.
I mean, you are just, I feel so sorry for you because first of all, none of your fucking business unless you're trans or you are the guardian of someone who's trans. That's it. None of your fucking business. Number two, you have bought into propaganda that is being used to distract you from real issues so that you side with people who are trying to destroy trans folks, to make their lives miserable, to make it illegal, to make everything worse. At the end of the day, if there is a kid who suspects that they are trans, the process involves coming out to parents or guardians, seeking counseling, interviews. Let me finish this thought. Seeking counseling, interviews, and then working up a potential treatment plan, which begins with, let's go ahead and have you dress and act and use the pronouns and name that you prefer. Try this on for size. That's step 3, probably. Step 1, coming out. Step 2, getting some counseling. Step 3, let's come up with a plan that starts with you trying this on for size. The notion that we're rushing right to puberty blockers is absurd. But even if we were, the available data shows that this is medically safe and helpful, truly helpful, to keep trans kids from killing themselves and from winding up in transformed bodies that are in opposition to their understanding of who they are. It is really, really bizarre. I had another point, but I want to get back to calls.
Yep.
Sweet. We have, is it from India, pronouns are him, is it Hard?
Yeah.
Hey, Hard called in to TACIS a couple weeks ago.
Okay. I apologize. I just want to make sure I wasn't pronouncing it wrong.
It's okay. My question is exactly what I wrote in over here. As in, like, here's the thing. Sometimes you can show people literally, like, all of the peer-reviewed research. You can show them the statements by basically, like, dozens of major medical organizations. But they're still gonna be like, but what about biology? Like, what about the gametes? And I wanted to ask, okay, if this is how we're going to play, what is the best way to just convince people to just see what's right in front of them? To see, like, don't be a douche to trans people, and, like, to basically support them. Like, what, from your experience, what is, like, the best way to convince people?
Well, convincing somebody of anything is incredibly difficult. I mean, it also depends on the individual, right? Like, some people will be swayed by evidence and facts, and some people are going to be swayed more by emotional appeals. Some people benefit better from, like, a street epistemology approach where you are sort of asking questions to get them to think more deeply about their own beliefs and the reasons that they have for them. I don't know if there is one best approach to convincing people of anything. My approach is to look at the facts, to explain to people where maybe their reasoning is wrong, or maybe where their beliefs are informed by bad evidence. And if people are being explicitly bigoted, to treat them like a bigot. And because in my view, while it may entrench that individual believer deeper in their beliefs, I think onlookers who see somebody get dog stomped by facts and framed as an asshole can be rhetorically effective in the sense that other people who are watching who weren't on the hot seat might feel... What was that?
Oh, nothing. Just 1 minute.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to mute him. Whatever the hell's going on there, we'll unmute when you're done talking about this, because I don't need to hear whatever arguments taking place in the background at their place.
Yeah. Just my point was that I think it's probably like not a good, necessarily like a moral necessity, but I think it can be a good thing to make bigotry unpopular and in some sense socially risky to people, where if they're going to voice explicitly bigoted ideas, they're probably going to be met with a lot of pushback from general society. I think that is, generally speaking, a positive thing, at least for the lives of the oppressed people. But I don't know if I have like a solid answer for you, because I don't think one method works for everyone.
It's Dawkins is complaining. Dawkins is complaining that he's the victim of bullying by the trans community, as is J.K. Rowling and others. It should be a win. These wealthy, privileged people with the biggest microphone who are spreading misinformation that actually harms trans people are now complaining that they're basically being bullied. And what that means is that the number of people who are no longer willing to tolerate gender critical, trans exclusive radical feminism, transgender focused hatred is increasing. We're no longer going to sit by and be quiet while people are trashing the people we care about. It's going to take time, though.
Yeah. So here's, I suppose that is one way to look at it. Although I do think like we should be civil while having conversations with people like Richard Dawkins and J.K. Rowling, I don't think that it's right for people like Richard Dawkins and J.K. Rowling to like just see, look at the specifically like uncivil responses and then ignore all the people who'd be more than glad to like have a conversation with them. Right. I think that's wrong. But like, right.
Sure. I mean, I think they do that, at least in part. It might not be like a scheming Machiavellian planning thing, but I think it's a defense mechanism to focus on the responses that victimize you rather than necessarily the actual entire breadth of responses that you're getting.
Yeah. I suppose that is true. Okay, Arden, so you said that there isn't like one single best way to respond to like someone being transphobic. Suppose that this is, and I apologize for this, suppose that this is the average Matt Walsh fan. What would you usually do over here?
In that instance, I'm far more concerned about... it's difficult. These answers aren't going to be satisfying because my position, I'm here in front of an audience of people. If I'm talking to a Matt Walsh fan, my goal is to have them make an argument, to point out what's wrong, if there's anything wrong with the argument, to point out where they're wrong on the facts, if they're wrong on the facts, and if they're being bigoted, to push back on them very forcefully and to not allow bigotry in this space, which is the line space. We have a huge trans audience. We're often not defended the way we deserve it. And so I think it's sort of incumbent on me to do that for trans people for once and to try to just push back with the facts. But it's really, you have to play it by ear. Because, I mean, sometimes, like last time Matt and I were doing this last month, we had a caller who came on who was like believing all the same things that a typical Matt Walsh fan would believe, but was actually opening to listening, in which case dialoguing more gently became clearly the way to go in that situation. I think you have to be adaptable. If you're locked into, one way to respond to bigots or one way to respond to misinformation, I think you're going to probably fail a decent portion of the time. You have to be flexible enough to have a read on the situation and read what this person's, behavior is like. What is their conversational technique like? Like, are they going to be open to information, or are they going to just accuse you of lying for no reason at all? Like, it really depends on the individual you're talking to. I mean, like with you, when we talked a couple weeks ago, you were doubtful about some things, which is fair. As I've said many times, the data on trans healthcare, I wish could be even stronger than it is. It's not as strong as there are for other similar things, and it's stronger than other similar things, the data for trans healthcare and trans identities. But you were like open to listening. So I was probably a lot more civil with you than I would have been if you had been a little bit more difficult. There's a lot of things to consider. And if you're just some average Joe on like a Discord server who's having conversations with people, the set of parameters that you're considering is going to be totally different, because you don't have to think about an audience or someone else watching who believes what the caller does, but isn't in the hot seat in that moment. There's just too many factors to consider to give a one size fits all approach.
I had a great idea for how to end transphobia. Unfortunately, like many other things, it ultimately turns out to be unethical. So like there would be this great experiment you could do by like taking every child and just shipping them off to an island where they're never taught religion or politics or other views like that. But you can't do that, just like you can't have children raised by wolves. And so I thought one of the best ways to end transphobia would be to make every single gender critical transphobe the guardian of an actual trans person. You have to live with them, watch them, and that way you would have firsthand experience of their life and might encourage a little bit of empathy and understanding for them. The reason we can't do that, it was because it would be unbelievably cruel to force trans people to live with these gender critical assholes.
I mean, if they couldn't force us to not take healthcare and stuff, then it could be almost okay. Yeah. But yeah, sorry, go ahead, Hard.
Oh yeah, okay. I wanted to ask this specifically because like Matt has had this is more in both. Matt has experience with this as well. But here's the thing: I live in India, and here's the thing: people here aren't stupid, but a lot of the time when you see people, discuss debating, like casually debating controversial topics, a lot of the time their reasoning defaults to my holy book says so, therefore it cannot be wrong. Matt, in that case, what should I do? Like, what should I do in that case?
Well, you have to find some common ground on which to have the discussion. If they're going to say my holy book says so, then you have to do why should I care what your holy book says? Why does your holy book have anything, any bearing on what I believe or what I should believe? That's a big deal, and that shifts the burden of proof on them. If what they're saying in that case is there's absolutely nothing that you could ever say that will change my mind. And when they say that, they're just admitting that they're closed-minded, that they don't have good reasons for their belief, and they aren't interested in finding good reasons for their belief. They just think, hey, I believe, and my holy book says so, and that's all of the concern that I'm ever going to have for this. But they haven't given a justification. They haven't made a reasonable argument. they have to address, okay, how would you convince someone who does not agree with your holy book? You just have to turn it back around on them.
Hopefully that's helpful. It sounds like we might have lost Hard.
I don't know if we lost him or not.
Well,
Yeah, I suppose like that is like one way of dealing with it. So, yeah, thank you. Before I go, can I just say one thing about like the people who are asking what is a woman? Just one message for everyone.
go
Yeah, I
for it.
promise I'll keep it short.
Sure.
Okay, so for the people asking what is a woman, I actually have a definition. Right? It is someone with the dimorphic cognitive development that is associated with people who have the capacity to produce large gametes. Done. This includes basically, not everyone, but like that's the thing with definitions, right? You want to know something? Biologists have been studying biology for like thousands of years, but they still can't define what life is. I dare you to define what life is, right? Can you tell me what is living and what is not? If yes, how do you know, right? If you define life as something that moves, rocks move. Are rocks living? No, right? If you define life as something that breathes, how do you know what breathes or not? Right? Stuff reacts with oxygen all the time. Is that living? There's a lot of stuff like that, right? There's a lot of nuance over there. And if you go like, try to take the easy route with like, life is something that's conscious. Great. How do you know what's conscious? How do you know what's deliberately reacting with to its surroundings and what isn't? So like the thing is, you could either like look at the world and see there is nuance to the situation. There is stuff that we have to learn. We were wrong about some stuff. Or you could just say, I'm not gonna like look at that. I'm gonna stick to my oversimplified worldview. Which one do you want to do, right? Because here's the thing. Sometimes we come across some stuff, right, that we haven't seen before. And the scientific method tells us that the right thing to do, the logical thing to do is to basically look at it, try to find explanations, back them up with evidence, run them through with contrary evidence, and then you stick to that, right? And then you get a conclusion from that. And if you apply this reasoning to issues about trans people, you're going to be on the side of the trans people. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you. This was a good call. I'm going to call in tomorrow as well. So, yeah.
If you could, because I couldn't hear it, there was something, I don't know if it was audio issue. I had a hard time following your preferred definition. If you could write that down and send an email, I'd be happy to look over it. It might be useful for the next time you call into Transatlantic. But thanks so much.
Thanks, Hard.
Yeah, thank you.
Also, we had a notorious, very well-known anti-trans activist pop in the chat for a hot minute to say that citing the statements of support of medical organizations in the US is not the same as citing evidence. However, as we've addressed so many fucking times, their statements are informed by the evidence and are often riddled with citations. So, you can go take your bullshit to someone who cares.
Yeah, when we say an argument from authority fallacy would be to say that because Richard Dawkins is an authority on biology, that whatever he says about biology is true. That would be an argument from authority fallacy.
That's good.
An argument from insufficient authority would be to say Richard Dawkins says that biology is the only criteria by which one should judge womanhood. That would be Richard being an insufficient authority. So there's your two fallacies related to that. When we cite medical organizations, we are not saying this is true because the Pediatric Association of America said so. We're saying the Pediatric Association of America, which consists of a collection of experts who have reviewed all of the available data, have come to a consensus. And much like everything else in science, it is not making a proclamation of truth. It is saying, here is the model that best indicates what the evidence show. This is how the data is best interpreted by these experts, and they can change their mind and they can revise those positions. Nobody is saying it's true because they said so. We're saying they said so because it's most likely true and they have the relevant expertise to do so, as opposed to some internet yahoo that doesn't understand the basics of fallacies and just wants to come in and get their digs in. You are not prepared for this game, bucko.
Yeah, also this guy is notorious for using this graph of chromosomes showing the abnormalities as being very tiny, which is ironically the fallacy that we were talking about before the show of assuming that because population level statistics show one thing, that always
Right.
applies to every member of a population, which is logically fallacious. Yes.
We got more people.
Let's hit it.
We've got Caleb in California, pronouns of him, wants to talk about the conflation in language between sex and gender. So welcome, Caleb. You're on with Arden and Matt. Thanks for waiting.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Arden. Thanks for having me. And just to quickly say, if there was some way maybe when you guys know you want me to talk, there might be a delay that you could indicate to me that it is okay to do so to avoid frustration, that would be good.
We'll do our best.
Right now,
yes,
you can.
I think it's cool. Thank you. I think that really the conflation between the language that we use in sex and gender, or specifically gender identity, a lot of the time can muddy the water in conversations, especially people who aren't too informed on the subject. And it often leads to confusion and a lot of arguing. I assume, Matt and Arden, me and you guys would probably have common definitions on like gender and sex that we could, put out there and see if we agree upon in order to have the discussion in the first place. But before I do that, you did say specifically earlier, Matt, you wanted to know a relevant situation that could be used to bring about why someone might need to know someone's sex. And
No.
I agree with you. I think
No.
we're not there
No.
yet. I'll let you talk.
I didn't say about knowing someone's sex. I said about knowing whether someone's a woman.
Okay. So I misunderstood you.
It's fine. I'm making that because, so here you're calling about, this apparent
Yeah, I was gonna
conflation
say.
between sex and gender. And I get it. There were periods of time where early on when I talked about trans issues, I mentioned some of the people that influenced me on this. I would talk about male, female exclusively as biological gamete related sex for reproduction, because that applies to the entirety of biology, life, not just humans, and not even to just creatures that are sexually dimorphic as a norm. We tend to have those categories. There are other categories as well. And then I would talk about gender, man, woman, as something slightly different. So I just want to make it clear. I was looking for a situation where it would necessarily be, where it would be essential to know if the person you're talking to is a woman under whichever criteria.
You're good.
Can I? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Then I don't have anything. As you stated earlier, I apologize. I thought you were speaking about sex earlier. I must have misunderstood. For gender, no, there is nothing.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So I will just belay what I said about that. We'll cut that off. I want to talk specifically about the conflation, as we have been talking, between sex and gender. Not you, Matt, but the first caller, Matt, demonstrated this quite early on in his call. And I just wanted to know what's the best way to go about it, because as you said you were, Matt, that's how I typically would distinguish. I would say, male, female, gametes, and then man and woman as to the gender. But even then, it seems, I know Neil deGrasse Tyson just put out a tweet where he was talking about XX and XY chromosomes, and then went on in the same breath to talk about gender. And it's just confusing. So I was wondering what the best way to go about this, like, does there need to be a change in language? Is the language, do we need to use it more strictly to the definitions that we have of it, just to sort of avoid, as we've just demonstrated, this sort of confusion that can often happen with sex and gender, related to politics?
I think there's I appreciate the desire to want to change language for clarity. However, I think it's pretty much impossible to do that intentionally. I feel like changes in language generally just happen gradually, naturally. And I think that, having conversations like this and trying to raise awareness about the distinction between these terms and really draw those lines can help. But I think, unfortunately, English, like many other languages, can often rely on context for us to know exactly what we're talking about. But also, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with having misunderstandings. I mean, as we showed here, while you're right, the conflations between sex and gender identity often caused lots of confusion. We had one here and we just mediated it super quickly, right? We just said, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. And then we're back on track. So the thing that's difficult in the social media age is, Neil deGrasse Tyson or Dawkins will often fire off a tweet and not make any follow-up or clarifying tweets if there's a misunderstanding. And I think that's kind of just a problem with the social media platforms that are dominating our culture right now, is that they're really not designed for clarity or understanding. They're designed for rage-inducing hot takes. So I appreciate, and that's why also I really tried to enforce that I don't want to be having conversations about trans issues on Twitter anymore or any social media platform, really. I think these conversations are really best had either in like a actual head-on debate with two honest interlocutors, or on a call-in show format like this, where we can actually have a back and forth and a dialogue, rather than again, just firing off a tweet and hoping that they see it, or coming back in 6 hours and finding that there was a misunderstanding and like 18 things have spiraled off from that, and now you have to respond to all of them. It's just not productive, really. But also it's not going away. So I don't really know what the solution is to the social media problem. But do you feel like that? It's kind of a sidetrack a little bit from what you were saying, but hopefully that's helpful somehow. Matt, do you have any contrasting thoughts? No?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was, definitely helpful to hear your thoughts about it. I guess in the sake of the context of this show, it probably would be good to lay out, maybe it hasn't been done yet, what you guys mean by man, woman, male, female, all that stuff, just so you have callers, if they come in after this, that they're not, you guys aren't stumbling over these same issues. If you wouldn't mind going over that, I mean, I could list what I think that they are, and then whether or not, I mean, I might be convinced by your guys' definitions more, but that would be good, I think, to just go forward with other callers instead of, like I said, tripping up over these same issues over and over again.
I appreciate that, and you're probably right that if we had some, master document that conveyed all our definitions and all the callers actually read it, that would be more productive for dialogue. However, that's just not possible. So I think really what just needs to happen is just, if there's a misunderstanding, clarify it in the moment. And again, that's why this format, I think, is far superior to having these conversations, because if we disagree on a definition, or it seems like our definitions aren't connecting, we can clarify that. We can say, wait, hold on. What definition of woman are you using right now? Because based on what you just said, that doesn't make any sense. I think that's probably the best we can really work with, to be honest.
In my opening remarks, I gave, I talked about two different definite or answers to what is a woman. One of them being an adult female human, and the other one being one of several generalized sociological roles related to primary, secondary, and extended sex characteristics combined with psychological constructs of individual identity. The point is, it's entirely context dependent. If you say, what is a woman? And somebody says, oh, a woman is someone with a womb. That's correct. It's just not exhaustive in its, it is one of the usages of the term that would be correct. It would be incorrect to say, oh, that's not a woman. What you're really saying is that definition isn't complete enough. And so if we, and I'm using the line or TACIS or this show or anything else said, here's our definition of woman, come in and argue with us. Well, they can't possibly win. But also, it may not be possible to win if we just use their definition of woman. And that's why the questions that I ask about this are designed to say, when is that a relevant question? Why is it any of your business? Given your definition, how would you tell the difference? And why, and what business is it of yours? Because the overwhelming reality is that somebody, I'm sure is going to run with this, but I don't give a shit. If somebody honestly tells me that they're a woman, they're a woman. That's not a comfortable definition. Oh my gosh, somebody came out to me on Twitter saying I believe in gendered souls. And I'm like, I don't believe in any souls, gendered or others. I don't have this mindset that there's the female soul and a male body, or a male soul and a female body. I have no notion about souls at all. But I do have a notion about psyche, about psychology, about robust psychological concepts, about identity, and how you recognize who you are. And in all of those situations, number one, it's none of my fucking business whether somebody's cis or trans, gay or straight, whatever. By the way, somebody's ethnicity, also not my fucking business. People make a big deal about stuff like that. Whether or not you're left-handed or right-handed, not my business. Also, how do you tell if somebody's left-handed or right-handed? You can come up with I can throw a ball to them, whichever one they catch it with. That's not true, because you can train yourself to use your non-dominant hand, and some people have less dominance. So it turns out handedness is this gradient scale, and what we're really saying is
spectrum, if you will.
Yes. Someone is right-handed if their predominantly dominant hand is the right one. But what about the people that are truly ambidextrous, that can functionally switch dominance, both with eye and limb and all that stuff? There's so many analogies and they all fall apart. And so I want to know, in which situation is it relevant? When is it your business? How can you tell the difference? Because my take on this is that if somebody says, hi, my name's Joe, my pronouns are he, him, that's all. That's more than I needed to know. I don't care whether they're cis or trans. Nothing about any interaction I've ever had with a person, their cisness or transness hasn't been relevant to any of it. And yet it seems to be the biggest issue of the day, while the polar ice caps are melting, while a 3 times indicted president is still not in jail, while the Supreme Court has lost any hope of being a useful body. Suddenly, whether or not my relationship remains legal is a much bigger issue for some people than those things. And it's just weird. So I'll ask the other questions. I appreciate the fact that you'd love a better definition. So would I. I don't think one exists. I think it's context dependent. I think it fits into several different wheelhouses, which is why it's not just about biology or just about psychology or just about sociology or social constructs. I think it's more complicated. And unfortunately, I've been having arguments with people who the extent of their knowledge and understanding of this comes down to a meme that they read on the internet, and no actual investigation, no actual talking to trans people, no actual talking with doctors who are experts on treating trans folks. And that's the thing we need to address, in my view. But I agree with you, Caleb, and I wish there was a better definition we could just all point to.
I agree with everything you just said, Matt.
And you're
if
correct.
You wouldn't mind, I guess, just specifically in the context of physical competition, using the first of those two in your opening definitions of adult female human or adult male human, etc., until those systems change. Like, one example would be of like a sort of weight class, like how it's done in wrestling, or based on hormone levels, or etc. There's a multitude of ways you could split it. Until that happens, is it of your opinion that it's relevant until those situations change? Or feel free to correct me if you disagree with anything that I said. I'm just looking, I guess, for your opinion on that.
So am I understanding correctly that we've skipped past the definitions and now you're asking about trans people participating in athletic competitions?
I guess I'm more circling back around to in the beginning. I agree that it's not about gender, but specifically one of the definitions that you did give, which was one of the two in your opening, which could be adult female human. Until those systems change in which people participate in sport or any sort of physical competition, do you think the topic of, I guess that topic in general is relevant until the systems change? Because
No.
in my opinion, if those systems change and it's split on different lines, then it doesn't matter at all. But specifically, I guess,
name a sport where the definition of woman is remotely relevant.
I hate to say this, but specifically in regards to shoulder span and lung capacity swimming.
Okay. I said name a sport where the definition of woman is remotely relevant, and you talked about shoulder width. That's not a sport, nor is it relevant to the definition of woman.
I'm sorry, I said swimming. If there was, some sort of cut between us.
What about swimming has the definition of woman as relevant?
I was just saying, of the two that were provided, one you said dealing with the social structures and the social dynamics.
No, Caleb. It doesn't matter I could list 10 different definitions of woman. My point was, what about swimming has the definition of woman as remotely relevant to swimming?
So to be clear, I'm going with the definition, the first of the two that you provided, which was...
No. Listen to me very careful, Caleb, because you're on the thinnest fucking ice. Toss out both of my definitions or add 20 more. It doesn't matter. For any given definition of woman, what about the sport of swimming makes that definition relevant?
Well, it would be nothing then if we're going to toss out the definition. So nothing.
Why is it relevant to swimming at all, whether or not someone qualifies as a woman under any definition?
I don't mean to offend. I think I might need clarification on. So on my end, what I was saying is, in your opening.
I don't give a shit about my opening. Just focus on the question at hand. Are you an expert on the sport of swimming?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Let's pretend that you are, even though you're not, and it's none of your business, because the people who are experts on the sport of swimming are going to make this determination. What is it about the sport of swimming that you think, whether or not someone is a woman, is relevant?
Well, nothing.
There you go.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend anybody, but I was just trying.
It's not offending. It is very difficult when I put together a question that's designed to expose something. If somebody keeps going on whatever line of thought that they're doing, it doesn't matter whether the definition is adult female human, adult human female, an abstract notion of gender identity from a durable. None of that is relevant to swimming. If you want to talk about what's relevant to swimming and performance, you can talk about lung capacity and arm length and all of those things, but those aren't criteria of woman. Those are criteria of a sport. And what we need, and what's already happening, is for the governing bodies that include the experts in various sports to look at the things that they think are going to make someone an unfair competitor in that sport, whether it's they're taking hormones or substance improving or substance enhancing drugs, or whether they have too high of a testosterone rate, or whether they have altered beyond the bounds of normal exercise their lung capacity or their ability to absorb oxygen, or surgically altered their reach, or I'm just pointing that out. None of those things are exclusive to whether or not someone is a man or a woman. And that's why I think in most sports, we should be opting towards a non-binary model. The only reason it's relevant right now, whether or not someone is a woman, is because we have a category of women's sports. And there are people who are saying in this sport, this particular category of women, trans women, shouldn't be allowed to participate. And their reasons predominantly are about pointing to outliers who, like Michael Phelps isn't already a genetic freak when it comes to swimming, but they point to outliers and then use that to set the rule. And maybe that's the right thing under some circumstance. But generally speaking, when we make a rule about where an entire group of people are disqualified because of an outlier, I think we've made a mistake. But I don't get to decide what's right for swimming. The governing bodies do. And what I see is all of these people who are worried about sports, trans women in sports. It's always trans women in sports. It's never trans men in sports. I guarantee you these people don't know anything about the sport in hand, couldn't name somebody that participates in the sport if it hasn't been in the news as a whine fest about how unfair this is, that some unheard of nobody ended up in 10th place instead of 4th place in a sport that nobody cares about, that only exists because the colleges use the men's football team to pay for 23 other sports. Don't get me wrong. We all know I don't give a shit about sports, other than I'm fine with them existing and working on whatever's fair. But if there's a reason why somebody should care about whether the participant qualifies as a man or a woman, I don't know what it is.
Right, and I think that was the point I was trying to get to. Maybe not so elegantly. I'm sorry if I offended you. Specifically when I was talking about how it should perhaps be split in different ways or along different lines, like weight or things like lung capacity or et cetera. I guess what I was specifically talking about is in today's age how people use woman or male or female or man, that people would think that it is relevant to that conversation, so that's why it keeps happening. I wasn't trying to, that's
fine.
not my opinion.
Yeah, no, you haven't offended anyone. And actually, I just had one of our mods bring up the quote from the IOC about sports as a human right. And I think this stands wholly in agreement with what you said. And I'm in full agreement. I've been on record, although people will try to misuse what I have said, that there are some situations where there may be trans individuals who do have some sort of a statistically athletic advantage, and maybe there needs to be some moderating principle. But I think this quote from the IOC really gets to what we need to care about with sports, where they say equally, the practice of sport is a human right, requires inclusion and non-discrimination, safety, respect for the basic needs, and a healthy environment. In order to fulfill the goal of Olympism, all constituents of Olympic movement need to respect internationally recognized human rights within their respective remit. And this is obviously, they've used guidelines to say, like testosterone levels or whatever might be relevant for the individual athlete. I'm perfectly comfortable with the notion that we may need to completely abolish gendered categories altogether within sports, which I know I haven't really been participating in the majority of this conversation because I've just been enjoying the live chat while this has been going on. And Matt's been doing great, and you've been a good interlocutor, so I didn't need to punch you around,
But on that note, Caleb, I got to move on because we have a ton of calls to try to get to tonight. It's a great show, and I appreciate the chance to talk about this. So thanks.
Of course, Matt. Thank you both. Thanks for having me. And yeah, once again, sorry if I upset anybody. It wasn't my intent. Thank you very much.
Did not. Thanks, Caleb.
You're fine. I appreciate it. One of the things is that both the delay and other stuff make it incredibly difficult sometimes. I'm really easy to get riled up. It's virtually impossible to offend me. You know what offends me?
Yeah, me too.
Muslims like Daniel Hakikachu who are trying to defend child rape. That offends me at every level. Somebody having a slightly different opinion about women in sports or something, that doesn't offend me. You know what offends me? Arguing that a group of people should be marginalized further and denied access to health care and dignity and should be misgendered, mistreated. That offends me. Defending bad stuff. Nazi shit, fascist shit offends me. Having a different opinion doesn't. Now, I've blocked lots of people on many platforms and even here, not for mere disagreement. Mere disagreement is my life. I debate for a living. This is absolutely not a big deal. We got tons of callers still, and
yeah, and we're at 2 hours, so I'll toss it up to you. I mean, we don't want to be here all night long. If you want to take a couple more callers, we can, but we're gonna be able to get to at most like 2 more, if any. So,
well, I want to see if we can do this kind of rapidly. So, I'll send you a message in a minute.
Okay.
Let me see.
I'm gonna close new lines.
JK in Canada, him has a question that I think we can knock out pretty quickly. So, JK, welcome to the show. Please go ahead, ask your question.
JK, you
Hello?
there?
Hi.
Hi.
Go ahead, ask your question, JK.
Okay. I guess you read it on the through the call screener. So I was just wondering, why don't we just call trans women instead of women? Or
We do. We call them both. We call them both trans women and women because both apply the same ways, and we call trans men, and men because both apply. Man and woman are the operative words, and trans is an adjective, just as cis is.
I get it.
Cool.
So
Cool.
okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Awesome.
I wasn't expecting him to say, "Oh, okay, I get it," which I feel like maybe he was like, "I've been on the line for an hour. I'm fucking over it. That's fine. Whatever." But
Yeah, that's a long time to wait to get an answer to a simple question. Literally, generally speaking, the biggest reason we would refer to someone as a woman or a man instead of a trans woman or man is because you may not know whether they're trans or cis, and it's none of your fucking business.
yeah, it's funny though when people think that any trans activist is saying that there's no difference between a cis woman and a trans woman. I've been in the activism circles. Do I see everything some radical conservative has ever said all trans women say? I've seen at least one person say it, because you can find someone to say literally anything in the internet. However, when I'm talking about actual trans people that I've met in real life or activists that I've actually had a conversation with, none of them, not a single one, has ever said there's no difference between trans women and cis women. That's why there's, as Matt pointed out, a fucking adjective there to point out, like, tall women are different from short women and average height women and black women and white women and Latina women, and there's modifiers for all the different types of women, because believe it or not everyone's the same. Shocker. It's funny that we ever have to explain that.
Yeah. Here we go. Jay in Maryland, pronouns are he, him, has a question about trans people and their comfort levels with their genitalia. And so I have no idea exactly what it is you're going to ask, but I must say, given all the other conversations we've had tonight, I am intrigued because I have known trans people who are absolutely traumatized by their genitalia, and others who are not. And so please ask your question and I will shut the fuck up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Oh, okay. Hi, Arden and Matt.
Hey.
Hey.
Big fan of your work. And I had my only trans friend, and I don't know how the conversation even came to this. Sometimes we have little sexual jokes, but they're a trans man, and they said that they're okay having their biological genitalia, and that kind of perplexed me. And then I'll be honest, one time I heard about Arden's OnlyFans, and I got a little devious, and I got flashbanged by the background image. And so, yeah, I'm just wondering, why are some people comfortable about their genitalia as a trans person? Because I thought the goal was to kind of switch teams.
So every trans person is radically different on this. And so I have said, I love my body, and I genuinely do. I'm like, that doesn't mean that I don't have dysphoria about my genitals. Dysphoria, I wouldn't put in the same category as like comfortable with my body sort of thing. Dysphoria is more like, it's hard to explain. It's like an irrational emotion that sort of overcomes you. I probably shouldn't use the word irrational. Someone's going to run with that, but whatever. But like, that doesn't mean that I'm not like, so the way I framed it and the way like Matt and I discussed earlier in our relationship is that I'm not going to deny myself the ability to have sex before I get bottom surgery. I want to get bottom surgery eventually. But right now I do porn for a living, where having a penis is very important for the daily masturbation rituals of at least 200 some odd dudes. So, generally, in my experience, men who consume porn of trans women, and this is not true of all these people, but in general, there seems to be some sort of preoccupation with the genitals. And I've heard from many trans women who've gotten bottom surgery that afterwards they didn't have as much success in their career. So for me,
Wow.
I personally, I'm not so dysphoric that I feel like I'm going to hurt myself in some capacity anytime soon. For me, my genitals are really just kind of like an annoyance. They sometimes make me unhappy during sex. They make it so I can't wear the bathing suits that I like. But generally speaking, it's not really a problem in my day-to-day life, because believe it or not, my genitals aren't relevant to like 99% of the things that I do, aside from work. Like if I'm going out in public, usually my genitals aren't relevant. So I think that's where it comes from. I know in the case of trans men, the phalloplasty is not quite as sophisticated of a procedure as the 1 or 2 stage inversion vaginoplasty is for trans women. There's a lot more risks, a little bit more downtime on recovery. And I've known a lot of trans masculine people who would say, if the surgery were more advanced or more sophisticated, I would be interested in getting it. But given what system we have, I would be more comfortable with my current parts as they are. I think if we lived in, a Star Trek future where, although it doesn't really make sense on a philosophical level, where you could just import your consciousness into a robot body, I think there's probably a lot of people who would be much faster to get their a genital surgery. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of data that talks about how the percentage of trans men and women who have had bottom surgery, that's the community term for it, and when compared to the percentage of trans women and men who want to eventually get bottom surgery, and I'm pretty sure for binary trans men and women, it's over 50% in both category who would like to get it eventually. But lots of people have just kind of been like, you know what? The only reason I really have a problem with how my dick looks in a bathing suit is that other people are going to think that I'm doing something perverted by having a penis and wearing a bathing suit when I'm doing nothing sexual whatsoever. So fuck them. I'm going to put my dick in a bathing suit and go out there, because really, what is the problem? Nothing sexual is happening. The reality is that people are just offended that they're becoming aware of a woman who has that set of genitals. I think it really just is so different for every trans person. But like I said, like for me personally, it's more like I'm not going to deny myself the ability to have sex and have a pleasurable life before I get my genital surgery. But I do eventually want to get that surgery. It's just unfortunately a little far down the road for me. So I think it's important to just not look at it in like a sort of myopic lens of people either want it or they don't. I think there's a lot of space in between those two things that trans people fall on, of wanting it but not yet, maybe like having a complicated relationship with the results. I've even heard, even though the surgeries, especially I like the Saporn method in Thailand, is very sophisticated. In many instances, you could not tell a bare naked trans woman from a cis woman. it's still for some people not enough. They want a situation where they can get pregnant and have like a womb, and they're gonna wait for that. So I don't know. It's different for every person, but I think those are some of the main reasons that I've heard. But I can't speak for anyone other than myself on that preference. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful.
That was interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for calling in, Jay. Hopefully that was good. And if you have anything else, we can talk to you next week because we're running out of time.
Mm-hmm. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.
All right. It's interesting because I remember when I was first introduced to a couple of concepts related to like gender dysphoria and things like that. I had no idea. I had no idea about anything. But it was especially strange to hear different people be like, oh, I love my body the way it is, or I absolutely hate my body the way it is. And I know that a lot of people have tried to advocate for this notion that, there must be clear identifiable case of gender dysphoria for it to make any sense to call yourself trans. And that's just not the way reality works. Life is so much more complicated than that. And somebody in chat even pointed out that their daughter, who's cis, has dysphoria related to certain parts of her anatomy. And it's worth reminding people that we tend to keep looking at it as, oh, you're different. You're in this box. And nobody other than the people in this box deal with the thing that you're dealing with. When the truth is, people in many boxes deal with those things that you're looking at, cis and trans people. It's right back to the same thing we were talking about trying to get a non-context sensitive, exhaustive definition that qualifies for what anyone and everyone means when they think or say woman. It just doesn't work that way. It'd be really cool if it did.
Be a lot easier to have these conversations. We could go, oh, well, the definition is this, so that's it. Or your definition is that. Yeah, no, and I think a lot of these conversations come back to, and this is kind of the same thing as what you said, but that ecological fallacy of like, you can't just assume because something may be true, generally speaking, of a population, that it always applies to every individual, because that's just not, if that were true, we would not have the diversity of life that we have here. The evolution depends on the flexibility within species of genetics and expression of those genetics.
Well, we got 3 more callers tonight before we get to super chats. By the way, we're going to read all the super chats over $10. Huge thank you to everybody who's been watching. We'll have some other announcements. But right now, Julie in Massachusetts, pronouns are she, her. Welcome to the show. You're on with Arden and Matt.
Hi, Matt. I'll make this real quick, and then I'll hang up on my own ass and tell myself I'm done. Yeah. Anyway, one of the things I did watch that Richard Dawkins podcast, and as I've told you, I've been very disappointed in him lately. But he and what's her face were saying that, like, oh, there's no tomboys, and now they all transition, which is this mantra that I've heard over and over and over again. And like I've heard women my age, I'm 42 years old, I've heard women my age, older, a little younger, saying, oh, if I was growing up today, because I like to play sports or because I was interested in cars, not Barbies, I would be made to transition, or I would think that I would want to transition because that's what's going on. And to that I say, actually, I obviously I can't speak to their own personal experience of what they might have thought they would have wanted to do, never mind all the assiduous controls that are involved to prevent stuff like that. But I actually have a story that, like, at least for me, completely debunks this. In the 90s, or as I call it, the Dark Ages, when I was growing up, there was this whole trope in movies that if there was a girl that was a tomboy, like in the beginning of the movie, she's a tomboy, she's 12 years old, and then she meets some cute guy, and next thing you know, she's a proper young lady. And I saw this reflected in the world around me. I always felt more masculine or androgynous than most girls, and tomboy was a word that resonated with me to describe myself, and I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, etc., and I wasn't outgrowing this. And when I think I was 17, so this would have been like early 1998 or so. I looked up the word transgender on the internet, because first I did a search for "girl does not outgrow tomboy stage," because I felt like I was alone, because I was getting all these messages from my parents like, you're growing up, all this stuff, and I found the word transgender, and I was like, and the only word I knew back then was transsexual for what we now call transgender. So the conclusion I came to was, oh, transgender must mean somebody like a girl who feels more masculine but doesn't want, back then what they called a sex change. So I used to run this listserv for my summer camp, which was very left-leaning. Like in the 90s, there were people who were openly gay, which was just unheard of at a summer camp back then. And on the listserv, I brought this up as an issue, and I said, oh, I'm transgender. I identify as male. And this one person, who last I heard actually came out as non-binary, said, well, actually already knew a lot about this issue, and said, no. They said, if you say that you're transgender, it means you see yourself as a boy. Mm. And I said, oh, no. Like once it was clarified for me, I was like, oh, no. I'm not. And, once it was clarified that this wasn't somebody who's like, oh, I feel more masculine, like that it meant something completely different. So I knew the word. I had it clarified what it meant. I was like, no, I would not want to actually be a boy. And so I can't think of a time or a place where I would have wanted the transition. And in fact, I think if I were growing up today, I would come to the conclusion pretty quickly that I wasn't transgender, because I would have more of a point of reference for what being transgender was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I think a lot of this also depends on the flawed thing that I see gender critical say all the time, which is that like trans people are just performing stereotypes, when in reality, trans people probably have the most diversity and our gender expression of any group. I know so many trans women who are very comfortably and sure that they're women, but have a very diverse gender expression. From like, I'm kind of generic in my gender expression as a woman. There's so much diversity, and trans people are the one who are advocating for all the time. You don't have to be trans. You can be a guy who likes to wear dresses, like fucking what's his name, Finster, the dude who's like always dressing like a girl, wearing skirts and cat ears and shit all over Twitter. But he's very clear that he is a guy. He knows he's a guy. He doesn't want to transition or whatever. And maybe that's changed. I don't know. But last I heard, that's where he was. And like, that's fine. I want a world where if you want to be a tomboy, you can be a tomboy without anyone giving you a hard time for it. If you want to be a dude who wears dresses, you can do that. If you want to transition because you realize you're transgender, you can also do that. Yeah, it's, again, why I've been so frustrated with Dawkins, because it's like, people will be like, oh, he's just defending the science. He's not, though. He's getting the actual biology wrong, which is egregious from him a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And he's getting the facts on trans issues in particular just wrong all of the time. It's very clear that he is just barely getting into the gender critical community and just getting savvy with their arguments, because all of his arguments that he uses are like the intro base level gender critical arguments. I'm excited for him to level up, maybe get to like level 3 of gender critical arguments. We can actually have a real challenge here, because it's so pathetically weak, these arguments of tomboys don't exist anymore. Shut the fuck up. Of course they do. Trans people enable diversity and gender expression more than anything else. So, yeah. Thank you for the story, though, Julie. I was just saying thank you for bringing the story. I didn't know that he said that, and it's just, he's
actually,
laughable.
It might not have been him. It might have been that woman, and he might have been agreeing. I don't remember. I've just heard it so many places that it just like really. The other thing, the one thing that he did say that pissed me off is that he's saying, oh, like teachers are encouraging this, or they're, kids deny reality. I was like, wait a second. My mother is a retired teacher. She had transgender kids. and she was supportive of them. And you know, when Richard says stuff like that, he's like making it easier for people to say, "Oh, teachers are grooming," you know, and all this horse shit. I mean, maybe he's not aware of what's going on over here, but it's awful. And
he's aware.
But yeah, I mean, it's a shame because I mean, I've respected him for a very long time, and I mean, I still respect him as a good writer. I still respect him as someone who's good at explaining evolutionary biology to somebody who doesn't understand it. But I have to, and he seems like a nice guy. I've met him several times. I've used to email with him sometimes, but like I feel like in some ways I am losing respect for him. You know, I mean, I just posted on Facebook a link to this, and I said Matt Dillahunty is the poster child for critical thinking. Just watch the intro to this episode. So
well, we don't have to go that far. But anyway, thanks a bunch, Julie.
All right, I'll hang up on my own ass. Bye-bye. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks. Somehow or another, we went from having 3 calls to having 3 calls again.
I closed all the lines. I don't know how a 4th caller could have gotten in. I think it is a spicy call. I'm pretty sure 19.3 is the one that snuck in somehow. And quite frankly, we just don't have time to have another call that serious. We've already done basically that topic 3 times tonight.
Let me do it this way. John in Denver, can you hear me?
Oh yes, Matt. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking my call.
We're not taking your call. I'm putting you through so that I can say that we're not going to, because there's somebody who's been on hold for 2 hours and somebody who's been on hold for 45 minutes. We're going to take those 2 calls, and I'd like to see if maybe you can call into the Transatlantic Call-In Show or something else to address your topic, because we've already hit that.
I definitely will. Thank you. I definitely will. Please
Thanks,
take
Sean.
those other calls.
Thank you so much, John.
John snuck in after we closed the lines, which is fine.
It's unfortunate because John actually sounded like a good, he sounded honest. So,
Yeah, hopefully you'll get him to call tomorrow. Raphael in Mexico has a question about the philosophical concept of being, and Raphael has been on hold for 2 hours and 9 minutes. So
God,
I'm going to stop right now, let you ask your question, do my best to answer it in the short time that we have left. Welcome to the show, Raphael.
Hi, Matt. It's an honor to meet you. I want to say I've been following you for about 10 years now. Well, I'm an atheist activist in Mexico. I have my own channel, etc. And I was listening to your debate with Trey, and I think we may have different understanding of being, because you stated as being an agent, and well, from what I've studied in philosophy, being is anything. Rock is. The being of a rock is, it's being a rock. I don't know if I'm wrong, or can you please clarify it?
I think this may be a slight difference on a linguistic front. Being, the state of existing, is something that certainly applies to a rock. But there's a difference between X is being and X is a being, and that was what Trey and I were having disagreement about, the notion that that a rock has being, in that it exists, but it is not a being, because a being typically refers to an agent, an actor, a thing that like a human being, an animal being, a person. Yes.
Yeah. That's where I disagreed with you. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, it's fine.
I didn't want to divert so much from the show topic. It was wonderful. All I see is two hosts, a man and a woman, talking, and I don't know what the big fuss is about. Man, I really hate the fact that Dawkins made that kind of a statement. That's a big figure that's falling from its rock, and well, too bad.
Yep, I feel ya.
Yeah. And last but not least, I'll be sending an email to the email that was sent to me by chat. Thank you very much for taking my call, Matt. And I enjoyed waiting these 2 hours. I was actually listening to both of you. It was a wonderful listen. I didn't know the uses of Lupron. I researched a bit while you guys were talking about it. And Man, I just want to say that guy was so freaking wrong. And go ahead.
No, I just giggling because, yeah, I mean, it's amazing what a little bit of actually using like Google Scholar and appealing to academic articles does for you, rather than I heard this one lady say in an interview. Like, those things are not equivalent at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully that cleared up the issue of being, and if it didn't, send me an email. Maybe we can find some time to talk about it more.
Okay, is it the DRM one yours, or does it get to you? DRM Atheist.
Dear Mr. Atheist is Jimmy.
Dear Mr. Atheist is Jimmy. Mine is sans.deity. But
we can put that in the chat too if you'd like.
Anyway.
Okay.
Thanks so much for your patience.
Well,
I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for taking my call. I'll be saying hi in the chat. My name is La Cantina del Ateo. I have a channel. Have a nice day.
Awesome.
Right on. Thanks, Raphael.
All right. We have one final call.
Yay.
And then we're going to do super chats.
2.5 hours of calls, you guys. This shit never happens.
Well, we started 15 minutes late.
That's true. That's true.
And, but, you know, it's an important topic. And I always love having you on. So an excuse to go along is fine.
Dave
By the way,
Warnock's
I don't have the link to the super chats.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me send that to you. I was busy fawning over Dave Warnock being in our chat. I'm such a fan.
Oh, Dave. Hugs, kisses, much love. Steve in South Carolina, pronouns are he, him. You are live on the Hang Up. And I think you have an important question. I'm glad we waited and made sure that we take you as the final call. So welcome.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. Big fan of yours for many, many years now. You helped me out when I was a teenager to escape from a born-again Christian lifestyle, so I really appreciate all the stuff you put out there on the internet. And Arden, I don't know as much about you, but yeah, absolutely. Arden, I don't know as much about you, but I like what I've seen so far. So keep up the good work.
Oh my God.
So my question is mostly something that I don't necessarily have a strong viewpoint on right now, but I want to know, what are your guys' thoughts about if there's a disagreement between the parents and a child about the topic of transitioning? Do you think that there's a point where there should be some sort of state intervention? And I just say state as a general term because to cover any kind of government intervention, regardless of how that's formed.
Sure. This is an interesting topic. So I feel like a very close, similar topic that the audience might relate to is a situation with like Jehovah's Witnesses, where the only thing that could save a child's life is a blood transfusion, but because their religion denies it, they would allow their child to die over seeking the medically necessary health care. And it seems like the U.S. has decided that, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, I might just be talking on my ass, actually, I'm realizing as I'm saying this, but it's my understanding that the state has decided there's nothing we can do about that. It's the parents' rights, because parents have to consent on behalf of children.
It's changing. It's a little more complicated than that, because I think there has been some intervention, just not enough. So I don't think it's settled law, but we can get Andrew Seidel to talk about it.
Yeah, I think I would be of the position that anywhere where a parent is denying a child evidence-based medicine for personal reasons, not because their child has some sort of condition where the side effects may risk their health and well-being, and that's documented. I think it ought to be considered abuse, in which case the state should intervene. But I don't think it's that simple, and it's really difficult to fight parents' rights.
And it should be.
Yeah, I think for good reason. It's really unfortunate that this situation happens all the time. There's not a lot you can do when parents are making decisions on behalf of their children, but
there is a potential remedy. The burden should be high before the state steps in to overrule parents, but there is some remedy, and that is children can sue for emancipation. And so that is a process by which instead of having the state step in to say, no, you're making a mistake on behalf of your kid, the kid themselves can petition the state and make a case. The problem is that it is difficult. It is expensive. Courts are loath to actually grant emancipation except under extreme circumstances. I don't know that there's any good solution, just like it's entirely possible for someone to homeschool their children, and they have, and teach them just white supremacist values, and they can teach them that left is right and right is left as a social experiment and toss them out into the world. And by and large, we say that there's very little we can do. These are incredibly difficult issues that I hope we find better solutions for. I don't know, and this is me spinning this, I don't know that it's possible to come to agreement on the nuances of incredibly difficult issues like that when we can't even get past basic trans rights. I mean, the world is dying, and there are kids who are not going to be able to get out from underneath the thumb of their parents. They're not going to have access to puberty blockers. They're not going to be able to get assistance. They're probably not going to be able to get emancipated. And that is a terrible tragedy. And yet we can't get to those more complicated issues because we're being stupid about the simple ones. Right.
Yeah. I guess the main issue, the sticking point I have, because I'm more in favor of granting people unlimited rights until it becomes an issue than the opposite way. So I guess the question that I'm running into when I think about this topic is, when does it become that there's got to be a tipping point where the child's desires to transition override the parents' desires to not let them do something medically serious to themselves. And of course, that's maybe debatable whether or not this is considered serious. I don't actually know enough about the science of it to say whether that's the truth or not, but it seems serious, I'll say. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at, is like, where is that line?
I think I largely agree with you. This topic is just really difficult. And for all the reasons you mentioned, I think I'm wholly in agreement. There's an example of, well, generally speaking, genital surgery is almost never performed on minors. There's situations like Kim Petras, the, pop star. She got genital surgery at 16 in Germany, granted, but they had a similar age restriction, but she was granted it because her situation was so severe, her gender dysphoria was so severe, that they decided it would be more medically dangerous to wait those 2 years than to let her access the surgery at that age. And I think there could be similar determinations made, but the difficulty is, I think you would need documentation and proof. And if a parent is resisting letting their child get transition care, I don't think they're going to let them see a therapist or a doctor who could give them proof of their distress. So yeah, it's a really difficult situation. I think it would require a very unique set of circumstances for someone to be able to fight back against that. But I think it would be incumbent upon us, if we had the chance, to make the laws consider those unique situations. If we are able to find a situation where somebody ought to get out and we can allow them a path for that, we probably should find a way to implement that, right? But I don't think we really have that sort of system in place right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair point you bring up, that parents that are not going to be in favor of transitioning probably would also not be in favor of the child seeing a therapist or anything about this. So I didn't actually think about that. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult question, but it's interesting, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Have a good night. On that note, we are on to a massive wall of super chats.
So many.
And so, yeah, we're going to start. If I'll just start with Greg Markowski, but because, first of all, huge thank you to everybody. Genuinely, and this is one of the rare occasions where I will speak somewhat on behalf of both of us. This is not the show that we had intended to do. Sometimes it's important. I can tell you that while Arden is awesome, and you'll see her tomorrow on the Transatlantic Call-In Show, I don't know how many of you would have enjoyed it. We were not going to do a snake show. Someday we will do an episode where my hang up is just our snakes, because
so many babies.
let me tell you, we have an incubator with 40 some odd eggs down there, and there's at least, well, I can't even hardly say. I think there are 2 more females that should be laying eggs soon. Definitely one. If we showed you Laverne, she's so big, I don't even want to pick her up and show you right now because it's like there's 12 babies or 12 eggs that could pop out of her. We have hatched 11 ball pythons so far this year. There's a bunch more that are hatching over August and September. We will be going to a lot of reptile shows, including we'll be visiting one this weekend, although we won't be working at it. And we will be getting both our Morph Market page updated and the other stuff with Epic Loot Exotics. So those of you who are either patrons of Epic Loot Exotics or fans, if you know that you have a snake or you want a snake, man, we've got some good options. We've already given birth to a banana, 2 black pastel bananas that might also have mahogany, and a super banana with mahogany, as well as a number of snakes, including a super pastel, super gravel lemonback Enchi that I haven't sexed yet because we're waiting for her to shed.
We tried.
I suspect that one may not be getting sold.
Yeah. They're pretty nice. But anyway.
As either a male or a female, it fits in well with the breeding project. Anyway, we're excited about all that stuff. And we've got crested geckos where we've got multiple pairs of eggs from them. They're going to be coming out. There's so much to talk about.
I kind of want to get a gecko, but it's going to be too much of a hassle, so I won't. See that little box right there? There's a gecko in there.
Yeah, oh yeah, your little red dowel. And then in addition to all the stuff related to that, there are plenty of news stories that I'd love to cover. I want to get some experts on. We are looking at getting a number of different guests, including some guests that you may not know and haven't heard of. So as a reminder of what's coming up this coming week on the line, tomorrow, the Transatlantic Call-In Show at 2 p.m. Central, Arden Hart and Nominal Naomi. Jimmy and I will be on the Sunday show, Skeptalk on Monday with Forrest Valkai. You guys know it's probably going to be, it'll probably be a longer show than this. Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock, who you just saw in chat, is going to be on Tuesday, and I'll be back next week for a hang up. Also, Jimmy just confirmed with me while this show was on that on the 23rd, he's going to guest with me right here on the hang up, unless Arden's getting ready to tell me we already booked somebody else and I screwed up.
Nope. They didn't respond. I told them the available dates were the 23rd and the 30th, but I can tell them the 23rd is taken because they haven't responded yet.
Yeah, there's a great political event that's going to be taking place on the 23rd, so Jimmy and I will be there. Let's get to the super chats. Thank you guys so much. Greg Markowski, 1999. Greg, you are almost always first, and when you're not first, I still want to put you first. Thanks so much. Do either of you know a band out of Austin called A Band of Heathens? They're coming to Kansas City soon. They sound interesting. Thanks for the show. I'm not familiar with that band. I did look them up because I had a moment after your super chat came in. I'm familiar with A Band of Horses. I don't know A Band of Heathens. And so, yeah, if you go to the show, let me know how good they are, because if they're here in Austin, we like going to live stuff. We especially like live theater stuff.
Oh, my God. I have always been a theater kid, but we just found out there's a local theater company that's doing a show that sounds real. Like, it would be great for both of us. Like, we would both absolutely adore it. So we're going to try to get there. Yeah. 1999 from Shannon MC or Shannon Mick. Whatever.
Happy birthday.
It's my birthday. Happy birthday, but I'm going to dinner, so I can't watch live. How dare you not spend your birthday at home watching us? I'll give you a watch later, so give me a shout out. I miss you, Matt. Hi, Arden. Hey, Shannon. Hope y'all are doing well. Fergal, Burgle, Manurgle, Burgle. Love y'all.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shannon. We love you too. By the way, she stopped by. I've been streaming again. The last 2 days, we did a little bit of streaming with some Counter-Strike. I'm relearning it because Counter-Strike 2 is coming. I haven't played in 23 years. So if you want to watch me come in and suck it up, yes, you can go to twitch.tv/Matt Dillahunty.
We're terrible, but, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fair. I used to be great. Now I suck. That's the way it goes when you don't play something for 23 years. $20 from TJX. Today I heard that transgender military personnel can skip PRTs and deployments. I don't think it's true, but want to know if you guys heard anything about it or what you think. I'm at work. Couldn't call. Love what y'all do. I have no information on this. It would be very, very, very surprising to learn that they can skip PRT.
I don't know what PRT is.
It's basically physical requirement testing. It's where you have to do your sit-ups, your push-ups, and your run and all that.
Ben's
Ben
in the
would know.
military, and he just did a whole bunch of those, and he's been preparing for a potential deployment. So I don't think that's true, unless Ben just has decided to opt out of it. I don't know anything about this topic, so yeah, I'm just gonna like reserve judgment for now.
I would be very surprised if that's the case, but I'd love to know if there's a good reason for it.
999 from Claire, hashtag Team Arden.
Oh, fuck no. We are not turning the hang up into some kind of fucking
Team
hashtag Team Arden
Arden.
stuff. No, because nobody knew to do Team Matt. This is not fair. I'm getting bullied by the trans community.
How is saying castration a good argument? Makes me think the drug is effective and good. Kind of like when people say birth control is bad because it changes your hormones. That's the freaking point. Yeah, I mean, castration is loaded, right? They want you to have the imagery in your head of like what they do to pigs where they put those rubber bands around their balls to make them fall off. Like that's what they want you to think is happening, when really all that's happening is someone is taking a drug that they can then move off of in the future if they want to. So, you know, one is more politically expedient than the other.
$10 from Michaela Throne, hashtag Team Matt. Thank you both for the content.
That's not fucking written there. You liar.
Sending a small thank you for the hours of entertainment that you provided. I know it's not TACIS, but still, hashtag Team Arden forever.
Let's go.
And a heart. Thank you, Michaela. And
hey,
I mean, you guys already know I'm hashtag Team Arden. So
if I have to do fucking a 3-hour show here and a 2 or 3 hour show tomorrow on talking about trans rights, I'm just going to soak up all my Team Ardens. Thank you very much. $20 from KiaStar67, just because I really respect the channel and this show and what you all do. Rock on. Oh, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
That's
also
incredibly kind.
I wonder if that's related to the funny poll I had.
Oh, it could be. $10 from Jordim. Shit, I'm going to screw that up. I'm so good at these. Jordim. Anyway, should we take the consensus of scholars about the interpretation of religious scripture or consensus of historians regarding claims like Jesus without the magic existed as reliable? So that's really cool. A great question. So the consensus of scholars about the interpretation of religious scripture is still just an issue of interpretation. It is, what does this mean? What's the original intent? There are literary experts that can interpret something in this style. And so the process that you're talking about being exegesis is great, especially if you're trying to avoid reading things into it, which would not be exegesis, but intergesis. But with regard to historians saying Jesus without the magic existed, the standard that a historian would use is if, not a historian, just getting this from historians, if someone is spoken about, is typically spoken about in writings as someone who actually existed, historians just assume that that person existed until they have good reason to suggest they don't, because it's bizarre to talk about a fictional person as if they were real. And so this is a potential problem with historians and their methodology, because you could wind up believing somebody was a real historical figure, even if they weren't. The thing is, 99.999% of the time, that doesn't fucking matter. If it turns out that you talked about somebody in the past and they didn't actually exist, so what? The reason that Jesus is special here is that Jesus's existence is foundational to the other claims and the religion. And so I'd be fine with saying, generally speaking, historians agree this person existed. Their methodology for that is not robust. It is not, and it doesn't need to be robust. It is just that Christianity is making a very specific special claim that justifies people saying, hang on a minute, you can't even show conclusively this person existed, let alone that they did the magical things and performed these miracles and stuff like that. It's just a really long-winded response. And it's, I mean, like, I'm not a mythicist because I think it adopts a burden of proof that it can't quite meet. I also think the people who are asserting that Jesus existed have adopted a burden of proof that they can't meet either. And that the historians' methods are not up to the task.
Word. I don't know anything about biblical stuff, so. $9.99 from Brian Sturgill. Well, okay, I can't say I know nothing about biblical stuff, but biblical scholarship is not my field. Brian Sturgill. Doesn't matter. You're beautiful. That smile and glass. Oh. Thank you. I guess.
Okay.
We generally don't allow comments on physical appearance of the host. Sometimes we let it
You,
slide.
you want to
super
give me
chats.
$10 to tell me that Arden's hot? You can do that.
We sometimes
I'll
let
make
it slide for super chats. Yeah. Just
Thanks
don't
so
be
much.
weird about it, okay? Don't take that as a permission to be like, I can sexualize you in super chats. It's weird.
Yeah. 999 from Julie Cordova. Could a woman be someone when asked says yes? Love you guys. Yeah. And I think I literally said that earlier.
At least that's how we personally determine whether or not someone's a woman. And just like when somebody says they have a dog, they have a new pet dog, they could be lying about it. But I'm not going to just start with the assumption that they're lying most of the time for generic claims like that.
Yeah. When people say they're hungry, that they like chocolate ice cream, these things that are self-reported attestations about an individual's identity and preferences, you tend to just take them at their word because you can't read minds. And what good would it do to not take them at their word? Until you have good reason to think somebody's lying, I'm okay with accepting it as long as the claim's mundane.
$10 from Heath Evans. Love you, Matt. Heart, power fist.
Sweet. 55 euros. Holy macaroni. From John Doe. Hey, Matt, 15 years ago, I discovered Christopher Hitchens and my life changed. Matt, you have a similar effect on me and other people. Thank you so much. Kind regards, Wesley from the Netherlands. Arden looks beautiful as always. I concur, and it's far more important. Oh,
thank you very much.
There's an update.
Did I just update your list and it fucked you over?
You just updated my list, and
I apologize. I realized I hadn't been adding super chats for a while, and I was like, I should search and make sure I didn't miss any. I only missed one, but no, sorry, that's two. I'm gonna fuck up your list again, so keep an eye on where you are.
All right.
Usually only
your turn.
Okay, sorry.
It's your turn to read this one.
$10 from Crystal Butcher. Is there scientific peer-reviewed data completed, or has the following been discussed? Do we notice that more women, quote, against having an open mind are the same women who fought for women's rights in the 60s? I'm not aware of any such data that exists. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but that's like so very specific. I'm not sure. Like, surely you don't mean the literal same, like categorically the same women. You're talking about like women who would have voted similarly, maybe. And I don't necessarily know what you mean by having an open mind. There's a lot that's unclear here.
At a minimum, we'll just say we don't know about scientific peer review, and we may not fully understand your question. There's $20 from Kia Star 67 again, and so huge thank you for that.
Sorry, I'm adding new ones in.
Sorry,
$10 from Make New Pieces. You're awesome, Kia Star. Yes, Kia Star is awesome.
That's a fact. Read more about awesomeness in a library near you. $12.21 from BW Dingus. Matt and Arden, thanks for another great show on the line. Jimmy, keep frigging yourself. You'll get it right with practice. I think he's got plenty of practice.
$9.99 from Louise Richardson. So eat already. Yes, this is relating to I do polls now to get likes and donations because it's way more effective. And this week, this poll for this episode was, did you know that our hosts like to eat food? Do you want us to starve or eat? And so people are saying, yes, eat, take our money.
I cooked dinner and there's leftovers, which is ready for tomorrow. But after the show's over, we have to go for a 30-minute walk. And
I'm on a new fitness program.
We didn't anticipate running this long. Arden has to go for a 30-minute walk. I have to walk as far as I can to stay with her.
I was just waiting for it to get cooler outside because it's fucking Texas summer.
Yeah, it's 105 degrees. I have 2 air conditioners running in the garage trying to keep the incubator cool and the rats cool.
And it's still probably gonna. Is this me or you?
Go for it.
20 New Zealand dollars from Rise of Azazel. You must agree that women's sport is inherently about combating any potential male biological advantage. Otherwise, we would have open grades for everything. I think probably the intent was based on a very primitive assumption about biological advantages, for sure. And I think to a certain extent, it has provided an equalizing stage historically for women. But now we're at a point where we as a society largely agree that women's sport is important and that women ought to be able to compete and be recognized for their competition. And now we're talking about banning trans women. So we're talking about, when we're talking about, we're not denying that there might be, again, I try to word this specifically the same way every time, that some trans women who've gone through male puberty might maintain an athletic advantage in specific domains of sport. But that doesn't apply to every trans woman who went through male puberty. They don't always maintain that advantage, which is why Matt and I were advocating for as he put it, a non-binary system that would evaluate individual athletes and sort them accordingly. Because there's lots of women who are uniquely, superbly talented and might end up getting put in what would be traditionally thought of as the male category if they're allowed to compete, cis women. And there might be men who end up competing with the women, what we would traditionally consider as the women category. I think it's going to be a better and more equalizing system that includes fairness for all, which is why I read that statement from the IOC, who believes that sport and participation in sport is a human right. And that there's data on trans kids being allowed to compete in like local sports things, how that's tied to, sorry, I'm not a person who knows about sports. I don't know what the correct terminology always is, but I do know about trans people and trans issues. It's statistically correlated with their well-being in a lot of cases because it's about community. And at most of the levels that we're talking about where kids are getting banned, there's really not a concern for athletic advantage at that level. I just support evidence-based guidelines that evaluate athletes on an individual basis and don't make assumptions about them based on a group they may be a part of.
Yeah. Now, not only does having women's category sports work early on to, as you're pointing out, combat any potential male biological advantage, but it's about combating perceptions and combating the roles that people take on in different situations. And so I'm in favor of us having women's sports when it makes sense. But for example, there's no reason that I can think of that men should dominate in pool and billiards, in chess, in darts. Those things, the more dex-based games and the more brain-based games. You look at women's curling teams; they're fucking amazing. And so the question is, why do men dominate in chess? Well, it could be that men are just better at chess, or it could be that because men and boys are encouraged to participate in that the sample pool that you're getting from is incredibly deep, whereas women and girls are not encouraged to participate in that. So you're picking from a smaller sample size, and so you're getting more of the top players. When we see, there's a couple there's an 18-year-old Indian grandmaster who I think tomorrow, if he wins his game, is going to be the highest rated player in the history of India, beating out Vishwanathan Anand. My apologies. I should have just said Vishy, and then everybody would have just thought I was cooler than I am. But we don't know. Is it a matter of not encouraging women and girls to participate in these? Is it some functional difference? It is the perception that there's a massive functional difference that actually causes this problem. And in the same way that it would make sense to create women's sports to combat that, it would also make sense to include trans people in the sports associated with their gender so that little kids don't think they either get to be who they are or do the sport they love. Why should they have to make that choice? If it turns out that it's just terribly unfair, there may be other things we need to do. But we can keep encouraging participation in sports as a basic human right and encouraging people of any gender or no gender to participate in whatever sport they love. And then, for the first time ever, you'll get a proper data set to compare. And maybe it'll turn out that women are way better at chess and pool than men. Probably not, because, men are just better. Oh, yes, that's the actual perception that I'm trying to combat there. But, yep, thanks, Rise of Azazel. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Stephanie.
$9.99.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
Stephanie just said in the regular chat that sport is a human right is language is principle 4 of the Olympic Charter. I only got that language from you, so I'm citing that from you. So definitely, thank you for the clarification.
$9.99 for Paul Donnelly. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do, Paul. We appreciate the support.
$20 from Larry Fishman. I was hoping for calls on the Antarctic heat wave. I'd call, but all I think I can contribute is yelling, "We're all going to die," before dissolving into an incoherent mixture of laughter and sobbing. We're so screwed. Yeah, I feel you there. This is why, again, I'm complaining that why trans people don't affect anyone other than trans people. Leave us alone so we can all focus on the impending doom of our fucking planet. Please, yeah. God.
You know, it's going to suck when we're all dying, but we're going to refuse to hold hands with the people next to us because they might be trans.
Yeah, this was a sticker from Moyette Morgan. It was $20.
$20 super chat. Thank you so much, Moyette.
It was a little dancing pear, I think.
$9.99 from Stark. This has been an interesting conversation. I work in healthcare. I'm interested in knowing how has navigating healthcare been for general and gender affirmative care.
Such a mixed bag. So there's a lot of doctors who they're required to do like some research and publications to maintain their licensing, from my understanding. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're required to learn everything about every topic relating to medicine. So unfortunately, there are a lot of doctors who don't actually know what's going on, and you'll have to explain to them, oh, actually, when you're giving me hormone treatment, it's really important that you not only check my estrogen levels just around the clock, you also should check the difference between my estrone and estrogen, because one of them is significantly weaker than the other and gets converted into that form through the first pass effect, and like lots of little things that just doctors probably know about the first pass effect from general medicine, but they don't know that it applies in this situation. And so like other methods like injections or like implant pellets or patches might be superior for those kinds of patients. Luckily, my doctor here in Austin is fucking top notch. She is the bomb and I love her. She's great. But most of my doctors before her were not awesome. So I don't know. It's a mixed bag for trans people. I think it really depends on the state and city you live in. The closer you are usually to metropolitan areas, usually the better care you're going to get. But anyway, thanks, Stark. $69, a nice Canadian from Kathleen Moncrief. Love the internet number. I highly recommend the getting and eating of food. I just did it. Would absolutely do it again. Yeah, likewise. I like food a lot. Honestly, the best thing about this workout program is that I have to hit these like calorie goals, and I'm like, eat more food. By golly, if I have to.
Whoops. I missed a button.
See how hard
$10 for Richard Spruill. Talk. When do we eat? Evidently, we get to eat well. Thanks to you.
Nice. Thanks, Richard. See, it's not easy to do this in an expedient manner. It's takes time.
Whoop. I hit the wrong one again. There you go.
Failure. $19.99 from Nicholas. Food insecurity shouldn't be a thing. Stay healthy, kids. We need you to keep doing what you're doing. I hope you all know that we're not actually like starving. That was just a joke. It's the same joke that Jimmy put at the end of all of the clips. Well, not all of them.
Don't tell them that. They'll stop giving us money. I like eating.
It's true. You're right. I mean, I'm so hungry right now. Need food.
$10 to Donnie H. Love you guys. Thank you, Donnie H. We love all of your guys' support and the fact that you value what goes on here. I tell you, it's been we're rapidly coming up on. I can't wait till it's been a full year since I switched from just doing one show here and other shows elsewhere to just doing all of my content here. We're still working on building a community here at the Line, including LineCon, which takes place next year in conjunction with a total solar eclipse. You'll be able to come to Austin, hang out with most of the people involved with the Line. We're hoping to get everybody here, but I can't guarantee that, especially when we've got people spread around the world. A chance to get together, to build a community, to appreciate what we're working here together, because this is a continuation of my life's mission that I've been doing for most of the last 20 years. And it's so great to get to work with amazing people where we're just going to keep doing it. You can't stop us. You can't shut us down. I almost quoted a song from a racist piece of shit that I don't want to quote, but we'll skip that and just say this is awesome.
$20 from Greg Carpenter, feeding my favorite people. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
$50 from Bozeman42. Thanks for the show. Please eat and pay rent and all that. The line is fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah,
I mean,
thank you very much.
That will definitely help with eating and the paying of the rent, but also you guys can look down below. We appreciate all the super chats and everything else, but if you look in the description down below there, you'll find a way for you to apply. You go to www.qnaline.com/endboss. We have a number of applications. We're going to be starting that up, I think, in a week, either Saturday or a week from Saturday. Jimmy and I got to get together on a couple things. I'm still behind on a couple of projects in addition to that, but you can also find out about how to become a Patreon or a patron supporter at Patreon, and other ways to support the show if you're not comfortable using YouTube, or if you want to make it easier, just, hey, here's my regular donation to keep you guys on the air and to keep getting wonderful guests like my guest tonight. Just too fucking cool.
1999 from Jamnick06. Congrats on the python eggs. It got me wondering, if an omelet was made of a python eggs, would it be called a pythomlet? Would a philosophical system-based ancient Greek omelet recipes be called Pythagorean?
Yes,
that's a philosophy joke that went over my head.
That's exactly what it would be called. Thanks, Jamnick. 1999 from David Smith. My kid came to me in 1221 and said, Dad, I'm trans. Suddenly, so many things that caused me to question things before in my head suddenly made sense. I love my daughter. I'm proud that she trusted and she felt safe with me. Oh,
that's great. Yeah, it's really, even if you have loving, accepting parents, it's incredibly difficult to come out as trans. Like, so when, Dawkins and Helen Joyce are like, oh, it's popular, teachers are encouraging it. I had actual teachers join in on the mocking of me in high school. It's not popular. Teachers aren't encouraging it. It's difficult. So it's really awesome that you were such a stellar example of what parents should be doing when kids come out to them. $20 from Rob Irwin. Howdy, you two. 70% of poll respondents want the host to starve. What's your favorite Texas fast food for $20? Texas
Cane's.
Specific? Well, I think Cane's is Cane's is national. Well, it might be like South and the West, but.
So first of all, I'm not aware of fast food for $20. When we went to Wendy's the other day, it was like $28 just for two of us, and we just got burgers and fries for two people.
It used to be under $20, but for some reason, recently, it's fucking jacked up. I don't know.
We've been eating at other places other than fast food. Once upon a time, I think Whataburger is great, but I've been boycotting them because they're owned by a Christian organization and they proudly display the one nation under God and great big things. There's a few others. There's a couple of great burger places or decent burger places. I think Mooney's is pretty good, but Casino El Camino on 6th Street is not fast food, but it's the best burger in town.
Wait, is this me or you?
Go for it.
100 Swedish krona from Puck Tholander. Just wanted to send some love. # Team Arden. Thank you, Puck.
Of course, it's Team Arden.
I
don't even matter.
Mats.
9, there weren't any because we didn't tell anybody to do that. Nobody's ever done that. 999 from Electric Base 100. You tell me a good reason why a sport like darts is gender segregated. Breath not held. Thank you, Matt, Arden, and Jimmy. Joel.
Yeah. There are so many examples of stuff like that. Like, there's definitely situations where I can see why it'd be important to have divisions in sport to promote fairness, but it's just kind of become the norm and not actually about fairness is the problem. $10 from Memory King. No one was commenting on Matt's genitalia or appearance. Matt, you're beautiful too. # Team Matt.
There
Matt,
you go.
I'll comment on your genitalia, babe.
Thank you, sweetie.
Love it. Thanks for the show. Hopefully one day transphobes will learn to shut up.
All right. Thanks, Henry. We have 4 more to go unless you guys throw in some last minute ones, but we greatly appreciate everybody's generosity. $9.99 from Anton. Arcane. For most normies, sexual attraction is genitalia based. Do we need new gay, bi, straight, deafs? Is someone a transphobe if they're attracted to a trans person's face, not their genitalia, so wouldn't date them? I know you've hit this question a million times. Can I?
Go for it.
So I don't know that it's easy to generalize that somebody's sexual attraction is genitalia based. I think what it's probably more accurate to say is that someone's initial attraction, because you don't necessarily know about genitals, may carry an assumption of genitalia that could then be disqualifying. If you don't want to have sex with someone who has a vagina or someone who has a penis, that's perfectly fine. If you are basically fetishizing somebody else's genitalia, that's problematic because you are objectifying an aspect of the individual or the person itself. You are not a transphobe if you're attracted to someone's face and not their genitals. You're a transphobe if you turn that into a case against trans people in general. That, oh, you guys should disclose about, no. The time for you to learn what's in somebody else's pants is about 1 second after they want you to know. And until then, you have to go into it with a recognition that if you have preferences, you need to discuss them. Your preferences aren't necessarily a problem, but how you discuss them might be.
Yeah, I think this is just a difference between Ben said this, and I think it's so true that queer people and queer relationships tend to discuss boundaries and interests much earlier on. So nobody has to be like, I have a vagina. They can just be like, I'm really into someone going down on my pussy. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's the genitals you have. Whereas I feel like straight people kind of have this like de facto assumption about what sex is going to be on the table. And so they think they don't have to have these conversations when just having them will go a lot further for you.
It's really not that difficult. But anyway.
$10 from I Got Cookies. Oh my God.
Best mod ever.
You should not be sending us money. Yes. You're so beautiful with your smile and glasses. Oh, I guess Arden is pretty too. Yeah, you are beautiful.
Thank you. I'm overwhelmed by people commenting on my looks and genitalia. $10 from Josh. As a cardiac sonographer, I love your tattoo, Arden. Matt, once you get Seth's cat tattoo, I'll super chat for yours too. Sweet.
I can't show off too much of it.
Yeah. I think we don't want to get demonetized, but yeah. We're still potentially talking about that. I'm going to do a refresh. Is there anything? There's one more, but I mean, I didn't know if there was another one beyond that.
I don't have any others. Just that
Sweet.
One more.
So here we go with what is potentially the final super chat of the day until somebody does a new one to prove me wrong. $9.99 from Kelvin Pinon, probably not Pinon. Pennon. Howdy, y'all. Been watching for 6 years and will continue till I croak. Matt, you've been a tremendous help in my deconversion. Keep on keeping on. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy, because you're the motherfucker.
Sure.
I'm going to guess that's because you're the motherfucker. If not, I did my best. But
I just want to say, Dylan, I see your comment, and yes, I think that would have been relevant to the discussion, but it's $5, and we've been going for a really long fucking time, so let's wrap up this motherfucker.
Hey.
I'm
not going to do it.
You're not going to do it?
So you know how at the end of every single show that's ever happened here on the Hang Up, I put it all together in a bow with what my thoughts are? Mm-hmm. You do it. I'll see the rest of you Wednesday.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the people who called and were interested in having a conversation and, actively getting to some sort of understanding on the topic. And to the people who want to just assert lies and shit, you can go fuck off, because I'm actually interested in the truth on this conversation. That's incredibly important. And trans lives are at risk. The families of trans kids are having to uproot themselves from their communities, the places where they've been in some cases for generations, the places where they have friends. their classmates, they're having to leave because politicians have decided against the evidence that they have the right to ban kids from accessing evidence-based healthcare. And that's why we talk about this. This is extremely important. Real lives are at stake. Real lives are being affected by this. But I would rather be talking about, as we've said so many times tonight, the many more pressing issues that affect all of people in society, like our planet's well-being and the state of healthcare in the United States and workers' rights across the globe. The Republican Party, as much as they claim to care about kids, just made child labor legal in, Arizona? We live in some pretty wild times where the truth seems to be just not cared about at all by the general public, and that's really scary. So I just want to say thank you guys for coming here, for helping us have a better dialogue, for trying to get to some understanding, for caring about these issues because they are important. Thank you to always our amazing mods. I see Dylan and Morgan, and I got Cookies, and I know Stephanie was in here earlier. I'm sure there were some of our other mods, but I'm only going to scroll back so far so we can keep things nice and smooth here. And thank you most of all to the audience for showing up. I know that it was a little bit spicier today. We had a long show. The chat was spicy, but we appreciate you guys so much. Without you, we couldn't do any of this. So thank you so much for being here. Stay safe, and we'll see you all tomorrow on Transatlantic at 2 p.m. Central Time. See ya.
Bye-bye. This is the part where the credits roll, and I pretend like I don't think they can hear me, but I actually know they can hear me, and then I talk about how I was supposed to take my clothes off for some show, and I keep forgetting.
Oh, no.
Well, there's no time.